Chapter 59. The 30 Ruggiamos for lunch were soon sold out. Many customers craved the aroma of the meat and asked Meg to make more. Mag couldn't do anything about that. He had prepared so many ingredients, but he could only make Ruggiamo on a first-come, first-served basis. He had to start preparing the Ruggiamo 2 hours in advance, kneading the dough, and making the braised meat. He couldn't make Ruggiamo on the spot like Yangju fried rice. The customers were also very interested in the delicate little bag of Ruggiamo. Some even said they wanted to take it back as a purse, especially the cute drawing of the back on the bag. Amy was very happy. More customers came in the evening. The Yangju fried rice and Ruggiamo drove them crazy. The unique cooking method and the addictive taste completely subverted their imagination of food. Although the food here was a little expensive, there was no lack of rich people in Chaos City. Spending a few gold coins to satisfy one's appetite was not a difficult thing for them to do. "I'm sorry, but we've sold out today. The official sale will start tomorrow. Because we need to prepare in advance, the number of Ruggiamos for each meal is limited. Please come early tomorrow." Meg saw the last customer out with a smile. He turned over the sign on the door and heaved a sigh of relief. Although he had eaten the Yangju fried rice and Ruggiamo, he was still a little tired. The 90 Ruggiamos for the trial sale today were all sold out. Because the Ruggiamo took up some time, the Yangju fried rice was sold less than before. He sold only 50 Ruggiamos, and made 360 gold coins in net. Tomorrow, he would get up early and knead more dough to make more Ruggiamos. The 1,000 Ruggiamos were the key to unlock the tofu pudding. Now that he was the owner of a restaurant, he had decided to quit the fight between the two parties. However, he was a little curious. Would there be a salty party and a sweet party in this world? If people got along well with each other, it would be fine. If people drew swords as they did in his previous life, maybe they could set up a ring in front of the restaurant with a sign saying sweet and salty competition. People would fight on the ring every day. With Ugly Duckling in her arms, Amy looked at Meg, interrupting his train of thought. "Father, you must be very tired. Let me massage your shoulders." "Meow, meow." Ugly Duckling meowed as if in agreement with Amy's words. Looking at the two adorable little ones, Meg reached out and patted Amy's head. He smiled and shook his head, saying, "It's all right, Daddy isn't tired. Amy, just sit here for a while. If you're tired, you can go upstairs to wash up and sleep." "No, I'm going to sleep with my father today." Amy shook her head before patting Ugly Duckling's head. "Don't you think so, Ugly Duckling?" "Meow." Ugly Duckling opened its mouth and yawned. Even though it was nodding, its reluctance was written all over its face. "All right, then I'll speed up." Meg nodded with a smile. He began to clear the plates, wipe the table, and then mop the floor. When he was done, half an hour had already passed. Amy was already half asleep on the counter, and Ugly Duckling had already fallen asleep in her arms. "Put Ugly Duckling in the basket, and then we'll go upstairs to sleep." Meg untied his apron and hung it to the side. He dried his hands and stroked Amy's hair as he spoke in a gentle voice. "Millimeter HM." Amy nodded. Meow. Ugly Duckling seemed to have heard Meg's words, and it looked up at him with a hint of resentment in its eyes. It then grabbed onto Amy's skirt with its little pink paws and shook its head as if it didn't want to get out of her arms. "Ugly Duckling, you can't. Father said you have to sleep downstairs." Amy shook her head and picked it up. As she got off the high stool, she said, "Besides, you're so ugly. What if you scare me when you wake up at night? I might kick you off the bed." Meg couldn't help but chuckle. It seemed that Amy didn't need him to teach her how to be sharp-tongued. "Meow, meow." Ugly Duckling opened its mouth and tried to act cute to prove that it wasn't that ugly, but Amy still stuffed it into the little basket and wrapped it in a little blanket. Amy stood up and waved her hand as she said, "Ugly Duckling, you have to sleep well. If you do well, I'll take you out to play tomorrow morning." She then held onto Meg's hand and prepared to go upstairs. "Meow, meow, meow." Meow. Ugly Duckling immediately squirmed out of the little blanket and put its hands on the edge of the little basket. It looked at Amy's back and cried out pitifully like an abandoned kitten. "Father, Ugly Duckling seems to be very scared." Can we take it upstairs? I'll try my best not to kick it off the bed. Amy stopped in her tracks and looked back at the aggrieved ugly duckling, which was on the verge of tears, before looking up at Meg. Meg looked at the pitiful ugly duckling, then at the expectant Amy. The two of them acting cute together was a double blow, and there was no way he could resist. What could he do? He could only nod, and say, "All right, then let's take it upstairs." "All right." A joyful smile appeared on Amy's face, but her smile faded as she turned around. She crouched down with a resigned expression and picked up Ugly Duckling from the basket. She sighed, and said, "I really don't know what to do with you, but you have to cover your face when you sleep tonight. Don't scare me." "Meow, meow." Ugly Duckling cried out happily before finding a comfortable position in Amy's arms. It rubbed its little head against her and closed its eyes with satisfaction. After going upstairs, Amy placed the sleeping Ugly Duckling on the edge of the little bed, and carefully placed its little head on the pillow before following Meg to wash up. Meg helped Amy take a bath, and then bought a cute bluish-purple nightgown from the system. He dried her hair before carrying her to the little bed. As soon as Amy lay down, Ugly Duckling reached out its little paws to hug her arm, and its little head also pressed against her. "You're so heavy." Amy didn't give it any face as she pushed it aside. She yawned, and looked at Meg as she whispered, "Good night, Father, good night." Meg smiled as he stroked Amy's hair. She closed her eyes and fell asleep. Ugly Duckling, which had been pushed aside, came over in a daze again. It still wanted to hug her arm and sleep with its little face pressed against her. What a clingy little thing. Meg shook his head with a smile. He tucked the two little ones in, turned off the lights, and tiptoed out of the room to take a bath. Chapter 60. Youngju fried rice was delicious, and so was Rugiamo. However, as a person who ate rice and side dishes as his staple food, eating them every day felt like something was missing. Although the system had just given him a new mission, and he could unlock the tofu pudding, Meg still wanted to trick the system and see if he could unlock one or two other dishes. The system was silent for a while, and then said, "Since the host underestimated the system's mission, a hidden mission has been triggered. When 1,000 customers enter the restaurant, a recipe for braised chicken and rice will be unlocked. Each customer will only be counted once. If the mission is not accomplished in 15 days, your strength will be reduced by 0.5. Does this mean that 1,000 customers will enter the restaurant in 15 days? Mag raised his eyebrows. This task was much more difficult than selling 1,000 Rugiamos. After all, some customers could eat several Rugiamos, and repeat customers would spend more than once. One person could buy a dozen Rugiamos in a few days. However, having 1,000 different customers was a completely different concept. If it could be achieved, the restaurant would definitely be filled to the brim. However, only 155 customers had entered the restaurant in the past few days. If he couldn't accomplish this mission, his strength would be deducted. This was a bit troublesome. Of course, Meg wasn't worried about business. He was worried that the previous customers would stick around, and the new customers might not be able to eat it. This would definitely slow down the growth of new customers. The key is to spend money in the restaurant. It seems that I have to control the number of takeouts. It's best if I can achieve a certain publicity effect and satisfy the customer's requirements, Meg thought to himself. His eyes lit up when he thought of braised chicken and rice. This was one of the 3 food and beverage giants, comparable to Lanju ramen and Shozyan snacks. Meg had eaten authentic braised chicken and rice in several restaurants in his previous life. Although he would be merciless after wiping his mouth, the taste was really good. The meat was fresh and tender, and the soup was pure and delicious. After eating the chicken, he ordered a bowl of rice and poured it into the soup pot. It was delicious chicken soup mixed with rice. Now that he thought about it, he was really picky. However, when he thought about his vicious comments, Meg's face became a little twisted. Damn it. Even if I get the recipe after completing the mission, I have to be mentally prepared to be locked up in the test field for the god of cookery for hundreds of days. The reincarnation of the heavenly Tao was truly retribution. Meg ridiculed the heavenly Tao for making such a standard dish in his heart and fell asleep in a short while. The next morning, Meg was awakened by Amy's voice. He turned on the bedside lamp and sat up to look at the little bed. Amy was sitting on the bed, and it appeared that she had also just woken up. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and looked around before turning to Meg with a perplexed expression. "Father, where's Ugly Duckling?" Meg was taken aback. "Didn't Ugly Duckling sleep on Amy's arm yesterday?" Meow. At this moment, a pitiful voice came from under the bed. Amy and Meg looked under the bed at the same time. Ugly Duckling had fallen under the bed at some point, and it was looking up at Amy with an aggrieved expression, as if it were a little wife who had been kicked off the bed. PFFFT. Amy immediately burst into laughter. She lay down on the edge of the bed, and said with a smile, "Ugly Duckling, don't tell me I kicked you off the bed." Ugly Duckling seemed to have understood Amy's words, and it nodded with an aggrieved expression. It raised its little paws as if it were asking for a hug. A smile also appeared on Meg's face. He looked at Ugly Duckling on the ground and found it to be quite pitiful. "Right. I told you I might kick you off the bed, but you didn't believe me. Next time, you'd better sleep in your little basket." Amy shrugged. Then, she turned to Meg and asked, "Father, are you going to get up now?" She yawned as she spoke. "It's still very early. Amy and Ugly Duckling can sleep for a while longer. I'll get up to prepare the ingredients." Mag glanced at the alarm clock at the head of the bed. It was only 4:50 a.m. He got up from the bed and picked up the soft, palm-sized Ugly Duckling from the bottom of the bed. He placed it on the little bed and shook his head with a smile. "All right, Amy can sleep for a while longer." Amy nodded. She pressed down on Ugly Duckling's head as it tried to crawl into her arms. "Ugly Duckling, don't scratch my clothes. Father bought them for me. If you ruin them, I won't allow you to sleep with me in the future," she warned seriously. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling didn't dare to move anymore. It nodded, and lay down on the blanket with its eyes closed. "Good boy." Amy nodded with satisfaction. She lay down again, and also closed her eyes, and fell asleep again. Meg tucked Amy in with a smile. Then, he folded a small corner of the blanket and put it on Ugly Duckling. It was important to keep the kitten warm. Meg changed his clothes and washed up. Then, he went downstairs to prepare the ingredients for the Ruggiamo. He planned to make 64 Ruggiamos this morning. After the 4 ovens were sold out, the 1.5-hour opening time in the morning was almost over. At 7 a.m., Meg went upstairs to wake Amy up. The little girl insisted on brushing Ugly Duckling's teeth when she was washing up. Meg explained to her for a long while before she gave up. But in the end, she still threatened Ugly Duckling into rinsing its mouth a few times. "Forget it now. You can brush it when your teeth are bigger." Amy nodded as she looked at Ugly Duckling, which licked the water and swallowed it directly. Ugly Duckling stared at the little toothbrush and white foam in Amy's mouth and slowly backed toward the door. "This thing is too scary. I have to retreat. I've already finished the goat's milk I bought yesterday. I won't have time to buy more until the morning opening time is over." So, at breakfast time, Ugly Duckling, lying in Amy's arms, looked up at Meg and Amy eating Ruggiamo and Yangju fried rice at the same time. Its eyes were almost shining, but no one wanted to feed it. In the end, it raised its paw sadly to cover its eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. Amy took a bite of the Ruggiamo, lowered her head, and said with a smile, "Ugly Duckling, I see your eyes coming out of your paw. You can look if you want. I won't feed you anyway." Ugly Duckling slowly turned its face away, moved its paw, and looked up at the sky with a look of despair. Meg shook his head with a smile. After breakfast, he cleared the table. At 7:30 a.m. sharp, he opened the door of the restaurant. Chapter 61. Meg was a little surprised. It seemed that yesterday's Ruggiamo had brought people to line up early in the morning. He nodded with a smile as a response, turned over the sign, and stepped aside to let them in. "Mr. Mack, it seems that I'll have to line up earlier in the future. Maybe the line will stretch to the other end of Aden Square." Morbai came in first and said with a smile, "I'll have 2 plates of Yangju fried rice. Ruggiamo is better for young people like them." "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded. "Mr. Mack, I'd like a new dish. What's it called? The small-eyed man who followed Morbai sat down at a nearby table and said to Meg. The new dish is Largi Ruggiamo. It's already on the menu. Meg replied with a smile. In the morning, the system had automatically written the price of Largi Ruggiamo on the menu, which saved a lot of effort for Meg. And on the back of the menu, Meg had also asked the system to write down 2 rules in golden letters. 1. No shouting in the restaurant. 2. All transactions in the restaurant are cash. No credit. As for the rest of the rules, he would add them later. After all, he didn't know what kind of situation he would run into when he opened a restaurant in another world. It wouldn't be too late to add them when he ran into them. Meg's basic requirement for the restaurant was to provide a comfortable dining environment for the customers. It would be disgusting to be disturbed by someone talking loudly during a meal. Cash transactions were to avoid some melodramatic events such as debt collection. After all, he opened the restaurant to make money and to give himself and Remi a better life, not to open a charity hall. Except for dolls like Miss Luna, who could make him feel grateful, he had to pay for the rest of the food. The cost of ingredients was not low, and Meg, who was in a hurry to save money, couldn't pay for it himself. I'll also have a Largi Ruggiamo, no, 2. I'm craving it after watching them eat it last night, a fat man said as he pulled out a chair and sat down. Many people opened the menu and looked at it. Largi Ruggiamo at 300 copper coins per serving was half the price of Yeongju fried rice. Most of them ordered a serving first. After Meg recorded the number of servings, he turned around and went into the kitchen. The baiji bread was already roasting in the oven, and the Largi Ruggiamo was ready. All they needed to do was to put the meat into the baiji bread, and a Largi Ruggiamo would be ready. Good morning, Dwarf Morbai Grandpa. Amy sat down on a high stool with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and greeted Morbai. She also greeted some of the customers that she had met in the past 2 days, but most of them used some strange nicknames. For example, the man with small eyes was called Uncle Squinty Eyes, and the fat man over there was called Uncle Big Squinty Eyes, because his eyes were squeezed into slits by his fat, but he looked bigger, so she added a prefix to distinguish him. The customers had no choice but to accept Amy's unique way of giving nicknames with smiles. After all, Mr. Mac's food was so delicious, and the little girl was so cute, so they couldn't get angry in front of the delicious food and the cute little girl. Good morning, little boss. Morbai nodded with a smile. Looking at Ugly Duckling, which stuck its little head out of Amy's arms, he asked curiously, "What's that in your arms, little boss?" "A cat." Everyone who was waiting for the dishes to be served also looked curiously at the little thing in Remi's arms. It was furry and looked a bit like a cat. Its orange and white fur looked very cute, but they usually saw cats with pure colors. Most of them were white or black. They had never seen a cat with such a strange color. Ugly Duckling was also appraising everyone in the restaurant with its sapphire-like eyes. It had been sleeping for almost the entire day yesterday, so this was the first time it had seen so many people. Seeing that everyone was staring at it, it instinctively bared its teeth and meowed a couple of times. "No, it's Ugly Duckling." Amy shook her head and patted Ugly Duckling's head. "Ugly Duckling, don't meow. Don't disturb the customers." Meow tilde Ugly Duckling immediately became quiet. It found a comfortable position again and curled up in Amy's arms. It yawned lazily and glanced at the customers from the corner of its eyes. It couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them anymore, so it closed its eyes and went back to sleep. Everyone felt that they were being looked down upon by a cat, and their expressions were a little strange. They couldn't even get angry at a little girl, let alone a little cat. "Ugly Duckling?" The customers were a little confused by Amy's words. They really couldn't see how this cute kitten was ugly and looked like a duck. However, when they thought of Amy's casual way of giving nicknames and her sharp tongue, they understood a little. Ugly Duckling is just Ugly Duckling. This is probably its fate to have a master like Amy. Under everyone's expectant gazes, Meg took out the Largi Ruggiamo they had asked for. It was faster to make, and then he went into the kitchen to cook the Yeongju fried rice. Morbai didn't have any objections. Although he had arrived early, it didn't matter if he had to wait a little longer for the delicious food. Smelling the aroma of the Ruggiamo, The small-eyed man opened his mouth and took a bite, savoring the savory taste in his mouth. After swallowing, something seemed to rush out of his bloodline. He couldn't help but close his eyes and let out a long sigh of admiration with a happy smile on his face. "Is that all you've got?" Fatty Harrison looked at the small-eyed man with disdain. Although he was also looking forward to the Ruggiamo, he certainly wouldn't be as exaggerated as the small-eyed man. He opened his mouth and took a big bite, but his eyes suddenly widened. The soft cured meat was bitten open, and the sauce overflowed, blending with the soft and sweet by G bread. The delicious taste made all the fat on his body tremble, as if it were cheering and jumping for joy. The fact that he could eat so much meant that he was very passionate about food. His family ran 3 banks, so money was never a concern for him. When he was in the capital of the Roth Empire, he had eaten a big meal that cost hundreds of gold coins, made with all kinds of precious ingredients. He had thought that was the best thing in the world. But compared with this Ruggiamo, those things were simply unpalatable. How could those spices compare to such a fragrant gravy? Even the white steamed bun outside the Ruggiamo was so fragrant and sweet. What was even more miraculous was that after swallowing it, it felt as if he had swallowed a mouthful of hard liquor. However, there was no throat-cutting sensation like hard liquor. His blood began to boil, as if he had suddenly become violent. The fat on his body felt as if it was being burned, trembling slightly, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Chapter 62. Mr. Mac, your Ruggiamo is not only delicious, but it can also help me lose weight. Harrison was excited not only because of the delicious food, but also because he could feel the fat on his body vibrating slightly with the flow of his blood after eating the Ruggiamo, as if it were burning. It was even more intense than when his father forced him to practice swordsmanship. What did this mean? If eating such delicious food could help me lose weight, then it would be a blessing for fat people. Eating delicious food and feeling the weight loss at the same time was the dream of many foodies, but no one had ever heard of such food. However, such delicious food seemed to have appeared, and he had just eaten one. The feeling of his blood surging and his fat burning was so strong and clear. Although it was impossible to become thin in one bite, eating one Ruggiamo was about the same as practicing swordsmanship for half an hour. If he ate a few Ruggiamos every day, he would never have to practice swordsmanship again, and he could watch himself losing weight. Thinking of this, Harrison became even more excited. Although he didn't feel inferior about being fat, it was a good thing to have a chance to lose some weight. After all, he felt a little out of breath after walking a few steps, which was uncomfortable. Besides, he had a few brothers who were in the same situation as him. They usually went out to eat and drink with each other, and they were all about the same size as him. He had planned to take them to try Mr. Mac's cooking in a few days and show them what real food was. Now that they had tasted the magical effect of the Ruggiamo, it seemed that he should take them to try it as soon as possible. Only a genius like Meg could make such delicious food that could help them lose weight. Meg looked at Harrison, who was sweating and whose fat was trembling slightly, and accepted his praise with a smile. He was a little surprised. It seemed that fat people would have a stronger reaction after eating Ruggiamo. The fat was trembling at an amazing frequency. If it could really help them lose weight, it would be amazing. Maybe this point alone could make the sales of Ruggiamo soar. But although the pork in the Ruggiamo had a violent factor, the system said that it only affected the blood. Why did it affect the fat now? Meg was a little confused. When one is overly obese, their blood vessels will be squeezed by the fat. Therefore, when the blood accelerates, it will produce a certain amount of exercise on the fat in the blood vessels and the fat around the blood vessels. Therefore, it will have a certain fat reduction effect. However, this effect will only be maintained until the blood flows normally in the blood vessels. Therefore, it will not have much effect on people who are moderately obese or below. The main effect of this large Ruggiamo is to strengthen the blood vessels, not to lose weight, the system explained to Meg. Meg finally understood. No wonder he and Amy did not have the same reaction as Harrison did after eating it. But this effect was really good news for moderately obese people. Even if they couldn't become thin by eating Ruggiamo, they could at least eat until they were healthy again. After hearing the system's explanation, Meg looked at Harrison, and said, "The weight loss effect might only allow your body to return to normal. If you want to lose weight, I'm afraid you'll have to control your diet and exercise." Although using weight loss as a gimmick would certainly promote the Ruggiamo quickly, if the effect did not meet expectations, there might be some extra trouble. The Ruggiamo was worth the price just because of its delicious taste. The extra effect was a bonus. Meg was confident that the Ruggiamo was irreplaceable. Even if there were imitators on the market, he would not have to worry about the business being stolen. "I see." Harrison nodded. He glanced at the skinny man with small eyes beside him. His face had become ruddy and energetic, but nothing had happened to him. But on second thought, he nodded with a smile and said, "It would be great if I could return to normal. I'm out of breath now, and it's hard for me to do anything. I'll call my friends over tomorrow. They'll definitely love this Ruggiamo. Boss, can I have 2 more? Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded with a smile. Of course, he welcomed such behavior. The number of Ruggiamos sold was very important, and so was the number of customers. 1,000 customers was not a small number. The other customers didn't wait any longer. They all took a bite of the Ruggiamo in their hands. Feeling the delicious taste in their mouths, they all smiled happily and couldn't help exclaiming in a strange way. The impact of the delicious taste was too strong. "Boss, please give me another one." "Me too." After only 1 bite, many people had already started ordering again. "I knew it. Father's food is the best," Amy murmured softly, stroking Ugly Duckling's fur. Looking at the happy faces of the customers, she also smiled happily. "Is this a restaurant?" Outside Amy's, the tall Sargeras looked at the restaurant with a slight frown. He had traveled to many places on the continent, and had only come to Chaos City a few days ago. He couldn't remember how many times he had been here, but he didn't expect to see a restaurant in this corner of the Aden Square. Judging from the decoration, it seemed to be run by a human. He took 2 steps forward and looked at the transparent crystal. It was so clear and transparent. He wanted to reach out his hands that were covered with lava patterns to touch it, but he quickly stopped. This kind of crystal would probably shatter with a touch, and it would definitely be very expensive. He didn't have that much money in his pocket right now to compensate for it. He didn't have many gold coins with him. He planned to go to the Adventurers Guild to take some more difficult missions with better rewards. He would continue his journey after making enough money. With his strength, the missions that were difficult for ordinary human adventurers were not too difficult to complete. However, the rewards were extraordinarily generous. Staying here for half a month would allow him to earn enough for the travel expenses for the next half a year. He could then continue on his journey to find a way to break through. "Look at these guys. They seem to have something delicious." Sargeras looked into the restaurant through the glass window. The humans and dwarfs inside were holding small bags in their hands. He didn't know what they were eating, but they looked very happy. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded, and said, "Let's go in and have a look. The food made by humans is indeed the best on the continent. Let's go to the guild after breakfast." He pushed the door open and went in. Ding! The bell rang. Meg, who had just placed a plate of Yeongju fried rice in front of Morbai, looked up at the door. He was a little surprised when he saw the person who pushed the door open. Chapter 63. As soon as Sargeras opened the door, the rich aroma of meat wafted out, making his eyes light up. It was different from the aroma of roasted meat and boiled meat. The aroma of this meat was richer and more enticing. He didn't know what kind of spices and cooking methods were used to make the meat give off such an enticing aroma. He couldn't help but swallow. He didn't care much about the restaurant's decorations. He was a little disgusted by the gaudy ones, so this restaurant was quite simple. However, he was stunned when his gaze fell on the wall of the Ghost Islands. This was the first time he saw a painting of the Demon Islands in a human restaurant. There were also paintings of the capital of the Roth Empire and the Wind Forest of the Elves. He looked at Meg, who was wearing simple black and white clothes. It seemed that the owner of this restaurant was a man who had seen the world. "But will the owner serve me?" Sargeras couldn't help but stop. Meg was also looking at Sargeras. He had seen some demons when he went out these days. There were all kinds of demons, and there were all kinds of strange ones. Some had grass growing on their heads, some had fire on their heads. Anyway, demons looked the most abnormal. Of course, succubi were an exception. When he went out to buy goat's milk yesterday, he saw a succubus with a pretty face and a pretty voice. She was very domineering when bargaining with the owner. In just a few words, she had reduced the original price of 15 copper coins to 5 copper coins for a bag of cucumbers. She even gave him a handful of green onions. Sargeras was very impressed. However, this was the first demon to eat in the restaurant. This demon was very tall, even a head taller than the Harbeng brothers. His appearance was similar to that of a human. His eyes were dark red, and on his big bald head, dark red lava patterns spread from the top of his head down to his face, neck, and hands. They were like tattoos, and looked a little scary. He was wearing an old black warrior's suit, and the bottom of his cowhide boots were half worn out. It seemed that he had traveled a long way with him. What was even more eye-catching was the bright red cloak tied around his shoulders. The bright red color made the cloak look like it was on fire. Humans who had lived in Chaos City for a long time didn't have a strong fear of demons. After all, they could see all kinds of races every day when they went out, so it was normal to have a few demons as neighbors. However, most humans didn't like eating together with demons and forest trolls, which were too oppressive. They didn't even dare to speak loudly, so they ate in a more restrained manner. Therefore, many restaurants opened by humans would deliberately separate humans, demons, and forest trolls to eat in separate areas, or directly write at the entrance of the restaurant that customers of these two races were not welcome. The restaurants opened by the elves would separate out the most comfortable seats in the restaurant for elven guests, while rejecting dwarfs, demons, and forest trolls. All the customers in the restaurant looked at Meg. Apart from Morbai, all the customers in the restaurant were humans, and there didn't seem to be a section specially set up for demons, so they were all curious about what Meg would do. Of course, to them, the ideal thing was naturally not to receive him. Meg was also a human, so the possibility of him doing that was higher. Chase this demon away. Meg naturally saw through their thoughts from their eyes. But how could that be possible? He was still thinking about the day when he could get some treasures from the giant dragon. This demon was just the beginning. Everyone who entered the restaurant was a customer, so he naturally had to treat them equally. He wouldn't do racial discrimination. Host, the system suggests that in order to enhance the dining experience of the customers, it's a good choice to reject some customers from entering the restaurant. Or you can divide the restaurant into sections, and separate the dangerous races from the weak races. Each of them can eat in a designated area to avoid conflict. At this moment, the system's voice sounded with a hint of sincerity. System, can the number of 1,000 customers in the restaurant be halved? Meg asked calmly. The mission has been issued and cannot be changed. Host, please be more respectful of the mission issued by the system. Otherwise, the hidden mission may be triggered again, the system said solemnly. Then you want me to reject half of the customers out of the restaurant? Do you think I'm stupid? Meg pursed his lips. A line of ellipses floated by the system. Also, will you expand the restaurant for me? Meg continued to ask. The system's renovation of the restaurant is limited to the land provided by the host. Now that the renovation has been completed, there is no expansion authority in the short term. The system replied. Then you want me to divide the restaurant into sections for such a small restaurant? If one section for each race, there will be a total of 16 tables. You want me to divide 2 tables for each race, and then put the elves, demons, and humans on top of them? System, is this how your god of cookery operates his restaurant? Meg's words carried a hint of sarcasm. The system fell silent and didn't say anything else. Seeing that the system didn't say anything else, Meg didn't say anything else. He didn't want to divide the restaurant into sections, and he didn't want to prohibit other races from entering. In fact, the most important thing was that he had a blueprint in mind to eliminate racial discrimination. Amy was currently discriminated against because of her half-elf status, and that was something he couldn't tolerate. Parading on the streets wouldn't work in this world, so it was a good idea to start with the customers of the restaurant. Thus, he looked at the lava demon with a smile, and said, "Welcome, please take a seat." The customers in the restaurant looked at Meg with surprise. They had thought that he would refuse to let the demon eat. After all, most of the customers in the restaurant these days were humans. However, not only did Meg not refuse, but it seemed that he wasn't even going to divide the area for the demon. Instead, he was going to let the demon sit wherever he wanted. Wouldn't that mean that they would have to sit next to the demon, or even sit at the same table as the demon? Thinking of this, many customers became nervous. In Chaos City, the behavior of all races was restricted by the Grey Temple, and even ordinary humans could live peacefully here. However, even if humans lived together, there would be all kinds of conflicts, not to mention in Chaos City. Humans were generally the weaker party, so it was not uncommon for humans to be killed by demons, trolls, or orcs. Naturally, they would still have some grudges against each other. However, looking at the fragrant Rugiamos in their hands, and then looking at Sajaras, they hesitated for a moment, and finally chose to continue eating Rugiamos. Who cares? With such delicious Rugiamos to eat, even if they had to sit at the same table as a giant dragon, they would accept it. Let's talk about the time of the update. Chapter 64. Sajaras nodded. He was also a little surprised. Over the years, many human restaurants had refused to let him eat there. Even if he was allowed to stay, he would have to eat in a section reserved for demons, which made him feel awkward as if he was an alien. To his surprise, this skinny human owner didn't seem to be afraid of him at all, and even let him sit wherever he wanted. This made him feel respected for the first time. He looked around, and then pulled out a chair and sat down at a table in the corner by the door. There weren't any customers around yet. The tempting aroma of meat made Sajaras hungrier. He looked at Meg, pointed to a Rugiamo in a customer's hand, and said, "Boss, I'd like one of those." His voice was a little hoarse and dry, as if he hadn't drunk water for a long time. "Okay." Meg nodded, and then turned to the kitchen. "Wow, what a big bald head." Amy's eyes lit up when she saw Sajaras sit down. She slipped down from the bar stool with the little orange cat in her arms and walked to the table. She looked up at him curiously and asked, "Hello, big bald head. I'm Amy. Are you a demon? What kind of demon are you? You don't even have a strand of hair. Are you a bald demon?" Meow. Ugly Duckling, who was lying in Amy's arms, also looked up at Sajaras curiously. It was also not afraid at all. This was the first time Sajaras had been called a big baldy to his face. As a lava troll, his temper had always been as explosive as lava. No one had dared to look down on him when he was on the Demon Islands. In Chaos City, even normal humans would avoid him when they saw him. He didn't expect this little girl to call him that. However, when he looked at Amy, the anger in his eyes faded away. This little girl is so cute. Her silver hair was braided in 2 little braids. Her face was delicate and cute, and she had a pair of small pointed ears. She looked like a half-elf. She was also holding a furry orange and white beast in her arms. Now that she was standing in front of the table, the 2 little fellows raised their heads and stared at him with their big blue eyes full of curiosity and expectation. Looking at their expressions, there wasn't the slightest bit of mockery or ridicule in their words. It should be more out of childlike curiosity. If he had met such naughty kids in the past, Sajaras would have taken out a fireball to scare them away. But this little girl was so cute that he didn't want to scare her with a fireball. Besides, she was the daughter of the owner of this restaurant. The owner had shown him respect just now, so he didn't ask such a question. But he still looked at Amy with a straight face and said, "I'm Sajaras, a powerful lava demon warrior, not a bald demon." Baldy. Amy shrugged helplessly. "But your name is so hard to pronounce. Big Bald is so easy to remember. I remember it as soon as I see you." Sajaras's eyes lit up again. If the person standing in front of him had been a man, he would have definitely challenged him to a duel. No, he would have directly cast a bursting flames spell on him to let him know the consequences of disrespecting a lava demon. But looking at Amy, who looked so conflicted and helpless, he couldn't get angry. How could he do that to such a little girl? As a demon, Sargeras was rarely soft-hearted and compassionate. Over the years, there were many humans who had died in his hands for various reasons. But now, there was a fire in his heart, and he had nowhere to vent it. After all, the little girl had tried her best. It even made him wonder if his name was really too hard to remember. Your largi Ruggiamo. Meg came out with a Ruggiamo and handed it to Sargeras. He patted Amy's head with a smile. He had heard most of their conversation. This little girl is so lovable and annoying. However, as a person with a hidden poisonous tongue, there was an inexplicable sense of satisfaction when he saw Remi make the customers angry and annoyed, but they could only choose to forgive her after seeing her face. It was quite refreshing. Sargeras took the Ruggiamo and turned his attention from Remi to the Ruggiamo in his hand. The steaming Ruggiamo gave off an enticing aroma, and the chopped meat was stuffed into the white biscuit that had been cut open. He had been to many places on the continent, even the capital of the Roth Empire. But this was the first time he had seen a biscuit made like this. He couldn't help but take a big bite. An unprecedented delicacy spread in his mouth, and he couldn't help but close his eyes. Every taste bud was cheering and jumping. This kind of delicacy was so special. It was completely different from the meat he had eaten in the past. After it was combined with the soft and sweet biscuit, the taste was raised to another level. It was really delicious and moved him. He wasn't a picky eater. When he was on Demon Island, he often ate raw meat. At most, he would put it in his hand and roast it. Later, he left Demon Island to find a way to become stronger. After that, he slowly started to come into contact with human food. After cooking, the texture and taste were indeed much better. But this was the first time he had eaten something as delicious as this. It was like a small torch suddenly turning into lava. It was a completely different level of taste. Meg pulled Amy back a few steps. This pork was from Demon Island. According to the system, it should have a strong effect on demons, so they had to be careful of his reaction. After Sargeras swallowed the big mouthful of Ruggiamo, it immediately turned into a stream of heat that slid down his throat. His throat suddenly felt like it was on fire, and the feeling quickly spread to his blood. His blood seemed to be boiling, like a galloping horse, crashing and slapping against each other. Flames appeared one after another, like flowers blooming on top of his blood. Whoosh! The sound of rising flames rang out. Sargeras threw his head back and let out a long howl. His closed eyes suddenly opened, and flames more than 10 centimeters long rose up from all over his body. Then the front of his clothes burst open, and the fine lines of lava on his body split open at a speed visible to the naked eye. Golden red liquid flowed slowly inside, giving off a terrifying heat like real lava. Chapter 65. Sargeras's clothes were torn off, and his body was on fire. The red lava flowing in the lava patterns raised the temperature of the restaurant. Meg was surprised to see Sargeras's reaction. If it were another succubus who ate the Ruggiamo, he couldn't imagine what would happen next. He thought he might have to put some reminders on the menu. Luckily, Sargeras's clothes were made of a special material. Although he was on fire, his clothes and cloak were not affected at all. Therefore, the embarrassing scene of his clothes being burned off didn't happen. Mag wasn't the only one who was stunned. The two customers who had just walked in were also shocked. Although the rich aroma of meat wafting toward them made them swallow involuntarily, they still chose to close the door and retreat out of the restaurant when they saw that the lava demon seemed to have entered a state of rage. What did Mr. Mac do to that lava demon? Why did he put him into battle mode? The two customers walked a few steps away. Thinking of the tempting aroma, they didn't want to leave. They couldn't help feeling worried and surprised. Lava demons were one of the most powerful demons in terms of fighting ability. They were also very destructive. A few fireballs from them could burn down a house. Mag, who had always been gentle and friendly, had somehow provoked that lava troll. If this big fellow flew into a rage, it might even raise the entire restaurant to the ground. If the owner of the restaurant was powerful or had a powerful force behind him, he wouldn't have to worry about people causing trouble. However, there was only Meg and Amy in Mammoth's family. They were not at the same level as that demon in battle mode. They couldn't help but worry about whether they would be able to eat something as delicious as Yangju fried rice in the future. They had come early today to try the new dish. The customers in the restaurant saw Sajara's reaction after eating the Rugiamo. They also felt their blood boiling after eating the Rugiamo, but it wasn't too bad. It was quite comfortable. However, he didn't expect the demon to have such a big reaction. It actually revealed its combat form. He didn't know what Mr. Mac had put in the Rugiamo. Sajara's took 2 steps back to avoid burning the table. The blood in his body and the magma on the surface of his body were circulating faster. The chains that had not been broken for a long time seemed to have loosened a little. This feeling made his heart beat faster. Ever since he could no longer advance his strength more than 50 years ago, he had tried countless methods and almost traveled across half of the continent, but he still couldn't find a way to break through. He didn't expect that after just 1 bite of the Rugiamo, he would feel like he could make a breakthrough. It was as if a spark had been ignited. He felt that as long as he continued to eat, those sparks would slowly burn into a big fire, allowing him to be reborn from the ashes and break through this layer of shackles, becoming the first lava demon to break through the shackles in 100 years. At that time, the plan that he had conceived 50 years ago could be carried out. The thing under the holy lake could also reappear in the world. This made his expression somewhat excited. "Father, our chair was burned." While everyone was holding their breaths and looking at Sajara's to see if there would be other changes in his body, Amy pointed to a pile of black ashes on the ground with her little finger. Then she looked up at Sajara's with a serious expression on her face. "Pay for it, big bald guy. Although you're a demon, I'm super fierce. I'll set you on fire." Meow. Ugly duckling in Amy's arms also bristled. It meowed at Sajara's, but its voice sounded a little soft and cute. Sajara's, who was still immersed in the joy of loosening his shackles, was a little surprised. He looked down at the burnt chair and touched his big bald head awkwardly. However, he was in a good mood now, so he naturally didn't care about the compensation of a chair. He controlled the flames on his body, and the temperature dropped a lot. However, the cracks on his body didn't disappear, and the golden red magma could still be seen flowing slowly in them. He waved his hand and said, "I'll pay for it. But boss, give me 10 more Rugiamos." "Okay, that's what you said." Amy nodded with a hint of warning in her eyes. "Little owner, the bill, please." At this time, the small-eyed man put down the bag of Rugiamo in his hand and stood up contentedly. He took out his money bag and said to Amy, "Rugiamo in the morning makes me feel refreshed and energetic. It's so comfortable. 1 Rugiamo, 3 gold coins." Amy nodded. 3 gold coins. The small-eyed man counted out 3 gold coins from his money bag and put them in Amy's hand. Then he said goodbye to Meg, walked a little farther away from Sajara's, opened the door, and walked out of the restaurant. 3. "Boss, you're selling the bread for 3 gold coins. How much do I have to pay for the chair?" Sajara's stared at Meg and unconsciously reached out to touch his money bag. 3 gold coins for a bread that could loosen his shackles wasn't expensive at all in his eyes. However, he only had a dozen gold coins left in his money bag. If he added the compensation for the chair, he definitely couldn't afford 10 gold coins. The other customers in the restaurant also looked over, curious about the compensation for the chair. The style of the restaurant was very comfortable. The tables and chairs were simple, but not inferior. Instead, they had a simple style. "Yes, 3 gold coins for 1 large Rugiamo." Meg nodded with a smile. He also glanced at the ashes on the ground, and asked in his mind, "System, how much is 1 chair?" "1 matching chair in the restaurant, 10 gold coins," the system answered slowly. 10 gold coins? "Do you think I'm a sucker?" Meg pursed his lips. The style of the chairs in the restaurant was simple and elegant, but 10 gold coins was a bit high. All the tables and chairs in the restaurant are made from the same centuries-old tree in the depths of the wind forest. The tree rings and patterns are exactly the same, so the visual effect is very harmonious and comfortable. Now there are only 5 matching chairs left. "If you want to buy them, please do so now," the system answered calmly. "You're using the holy spring of elves to grow rice, and a centuries-old tree to make tables and chairs. Aren't you afraid that the elves will come to kill me one day? Meg was a little speechless. But he had to admit that the system had put in a lot of effort to improve the style of the restaurant. Using a big tree in the wind forest as a table, this should be the only restaurant in Chaos City. All the operations of the system are within the safe range. There is no danger of being discovered. Please don't underestimate the system said angrily. This chair is 10 gold coins, Meg said to Sargeras with a smile, ignoring the system. 3 gold coins. Sargeras looked down at the gold coins in his big hand. Chapter 66. Meg glanced at the gold coins in Sargeras's hand. There were exactly 13 gold coins. Sargeras had just asked for 10 Rugiamos. It seemed that he didn't bring enough money today. He wanted to laugh. The customers waiting outside the door saw that the chaos they had expected didn't happen, and that a man with small eyes walked out of the restaurant with a satisfied face. It seemed that there was no problem in the restaurant. They hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open and walked in. Boss, I don't think it's very kind of you to charge me 10 gold coins for a wooden chair like this. Even if I go out to buy one, it won't cost me more than 2 gold coins. How about this? I'll charge you 4 gold coins, and I'll buy 2 Rugiamos with the remaining 6 gold coins. Sargeras raised his voice and stared at Mag with his red eyes. He had always been too lazy to control his emotions when dealing with men. He was only talking to Meg for the sake of the Rugiamos. Otherwise, he would be holding a big fireball in his hand right now. The 2 men who had just entered the restaurant saw the lava troll getting angry, and hurriedly shrank back. However, they were stunned when they heard Sargeras's words. It seemed that this was another demon who had been conquered by Mr. Mac. Haggling with a human in order to eat 2 more Rugiamos, the demon was not far from losing his dream. Even demons were willing to lower themselves for Rugiamos. This raised their expectations. They walked a few steps into the restaurant and sat down in an empty seat, waiting for Meg to deal with the matter first. Meg wasn't intimidated by Sargeras's aura at all. He shook his head and said, "I'm sorry. All the tables and chairs in the restaurant are custom-made. To enhance the visual effect, all the tables and chairs were made from the same big tree. An outsider's chair would spoil the effect, so I can't accept it. A custom-made chair like this costs 10 gold coins. This was a piece of wood obtained from the depths of the wind forest. Even a single piece of wood could be sold for a high price in the capital of the Roth Empire. Now, in order to match the overall style of the restaurant, selling it for 10 gold coins was a very reasonable price. If it weren't for the fact that the system gave him so many precious items, Meg wouldn't have said anything even if he sold it for 100 gold coins. He was just a little worried that the elves would notice that it was a holy tree or something similar. The eyes of the customers in the restaurant lit up when they heard this. They couldn't help but lower their heads to look at the chairs they were sitting on and the tables beside them. They hadn't noticed it before, but now they realized that the tree rings on each of the tables were exactly the same. Even the stripes were the same. No wonder the tables and chairs in the restaurant looked so natural and harmonious at first glance. What was even more astonishing to everyone was that there were a total of 16 tables and 64 chairs in the restaurant, and all of them were made from the same tree. Just how massive was that tree? There was definitely no tree like that around Chaos City. Even if there was such a tree in the depths of the distant mountains, it would definitely cost a lot of money to cut it down or transport it to make tables and chairs of the same style. How could such a huge amount of money be used to make tables and chairs for the customers in the restaurant? They immediately felt that they were being respected and pampered. 3 gold coins for a large Rugiamo was too expensive. No, it would be a pleasure to eat such a delicious Rugiamo in such a restaurant, not to mention 3 gold coins, even 6 gold coins would be a pleasure. Many people already had this feeling in their hearts. They looked at the other decorations in the restaurant. If only the tables and chairs were so exquisite, the other decorations must be even more exquisite. However, on second thought, they couldn't help but be a little more careful. After all, if anything in the restaurant was broken, they would have to pay a lot of money. Meg's words to Sargeras had inadvertently raised the style and taste of the restaurant in the hearts of the customers. Most of the customers who had the extra money to come here early in the morning to eat a Ruggiamo that cost 3 gold coins had gotten rid of the stage of working hard for a living, and had started to pay attention to the taste of life. I. Sargeras's body burst into flames again. It seemed that he was really angry. He stuffed the remaining half of the Ruggiamo into his mouth and swallowed it, and the flames on his body burned even brighter. However, he had learned his lesson this time. He knew that he should stay away from the table and the door. After all, they looked more expensive than the chairs. He stared at Meg, and prepared to take out a big fireball to scare Meg. In his eyes, there was no difference between chairs. Meg was talking nonsense. Wasn't he just trying to cheat him of his money? He couldn't accept that. Big bald head, be a good boy and listen to father, or I'll burn you with a fireball. Amy, who was standing in front of Meg, squatted down and put Ugly Duckling on the ground. She looked up at Sargeras, who was covered in flowing lava and flames, and said seriously, "Little girl, step aside. This is between us adults," Sargeras said in a hoarse voice. He looked at Amy, who was standing in front of Mag, and felt a sense of helplessness. Seeing this, the customers all became a little nervous. Compared with Sargeras, who was on fire and had lava grooves on his skin, who looked a little scary, the little Amy and the skinny Meg were completely defenseless. Morbai also turned his head with a frown, but there was not much worry in his eyes. The fireball that Amy casually released the other day scared Hag, and Mr. Mac didn't look like a fool. He definitely wouldn't put himself in danger. "Alas, I really don't know what to do with you. Why can't you just be obedient?" Amy sighed. She reached out her little hand, and a bluish-purple flame suddenly rose up and slowly condensed into a fist-sized fireball in her hand. She looked at Sargeras seriously and said, "Eat, pay, or I'll burn you all to death. Are you going to burn me with such a small flame?" Sargeras looked at the small fireball in Amy's hand, and couldn't help but laugh. He looked up at Meg, and frowned. "Boss, you're a big man. Do you only know how to hide behind your little girl? My father is very powerful, but it's my job to collect money. So, burn, big bald head," Amy said angrily before Meg could become the god of cookery. She waved her hand, and the bluish-purple fireball in her hand flew toward Sargeras. "Heh." Sargeras looked at the small fireball that was not much bigger than his thumb. He didn't seem to care at all. He reached out his right hand and casually grabbed it, intending to extinguish it. Chapter 67. The bluish-purple fireball exploded with a bang and wrapped around Sargeras's hand. It quickly spread along the red flames on his body as if someone had poured a ladle of alcohol on a fire. Almost instantly, the flames covered his entire body, and a bluish-purple flame appeared on top of the red flames. The two flames seemed to be devouring each other. Whoosh! Everyone gasped at the scene. They hadn't expected a small fireball from Amy to wrap around Sargeras. They wondered how powerful the bluish-purple flame was. Sargeras glanced at the bluish-purple flames on his body, and said nonchalantly, "A flame of this level is simply," however, he stopped abruptly in the middle of his sentence, and stared at his right hand. The red flames that had touched the bluish-purple flames had been completely consumed. Although the bluish-purple flames were also almost exhausted, there was still a scorching sensation coming from his right hand. And this was only the beginning. After a hole appeared on his right hand, the burning sensation quickly spread upward. He hadn't felt heat for a long time, but now he felt a little hot. His hard skin even felt like it was being pricked by needles. Meg was a little surprised to see the change in Sargeras's expression. He had thought that Amy's fireball would have no effect on Sargeras, a lava demon, since it couldn't even burn charcoal. But now, it seemed that the situation was a little different from what he had imagined. Amy's fireball seemed to be very powerful. As a weakling with a combat prowess of only 1.5, Mag naturally couldn't just charge forward and fight with his life on the line. That was no different from suicide, and he wouldn't do that. But he wasn't worried that Sargeras would tear down the restaurant. It was obvious that he was very satisfied with the Ruggiamo. It could even be said that he craved it. It must have some kind of urgent effect on him. This was where Meg's confidence came from. Other than Amy's, There was no other restaurant on the Norland continent that could make Ruggiamo like this. Therefore, no matter how angry this lava demon was, he wouldn't attack the restaurant or the father and daughter. It was a good choice to test the upper limit of Amy's fireball. Since he was covered in fire, he shouldn't be easily burned. Is it not enough? Amy looked at Sargeras and frowned. Then she reached out her hand and muttered, if one can't solve it, then two. Stop. Hiss. It's hot. Sargeras immediately jumped back as he waved his hand at Amy. The lava on his body quickly circulated, and his skin turned a fiery red color. Only then was he able to withstand the bluish-purple flames, which had already completely exhausted the red flames. Sargeras heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at Amy, who was still holding out her hand, he hurriedly waved his hand and said, I'm not coming anymore. One is enough. His eyes were filled with fear and helplessness. Phut! Many customers in the restaurant burst out laughing. Sargeras, who was huge and hot all over, was standing in front of the cute and small Amy as if she were a cat or a mouse. This scene was a little funny no matter how you looked at it. But apart from the laughter, they were also a little surprised. This lava demon didn't look like a demon with an empty shell. This race was very powerful among the demons. If it weren't for the fact that there were so few of them, they could probably be ranked among the top 10 demon races. But such a powerful lava demon was scared by Amy's fireball. He was even a little afraid that she would use another one. This was the domain that he was best at and most powerful in. How could he admit defeat just like that? How scary was Amy's fire? The customers were already thinking about it in their minds. They looked at Meg in a different way. How could a person who could open such a stylish and delicious restaurant be simple? Even his 4-year-old daughter had the ability to frighten lava demons. It seemed that he couldn't be picky in the future, and he couldn't lose his temper in the restaurant. He also had to pay for the meal obediently. They couldn't bear such a fireball. Sargeras heard the laughter of the crowd, and his already red face became even redder. He was a lava demon warrior, and now he was scared of a little half-elf girl. It was indeed a little sullen. Although the bluish-purple fire was a little scary, it wasn't the main reason he was scared. The slow-spreading speed was enough for him to summon a lava meteorite and destroy the restaurant 3 times. But what could he do? If he destroyed the restaurant, the breakthrough opportunity that he had been searching for 50 years would also be ruined. This was something he couldn't accept. So he couldn't touch the restaurant, the boss, and the little daughter of the boss. But if he ate another bluish-purple fireball, he felt that a layer of his skin would be burned. The process would be very painful, and he might not be able to resist the urge to attack. After thinking about it, he could only admit defeat. That's enough. Meg put his hand on Amy's head gently, and motioned her to take back the fire that was about to come out. He also stopped smiling. He looked at Sargeras seriously and said, Sir, the restaurant has rules. Fighting and threatening the boss and staff are strictly forbidden in the restaurant. Otherwise, you will be blacklisted and banned from the restaurant forever. Boss, I was just kidding. You see, the little girl is very happy. Hearing that, Sargeras quickly extinguished the fire on his body, rubbed his bald head, and laughed awkwardly. Then he quickly put the gold coins in his hand on the table and said, 10 gold coins for the chair and 3 gold coins for the Largi Ruggiamo. Here's all the money you're supposed to give me. But boss, I don't have enough money today. Can you sell me 10 Largi Ruggiamos on credit? I swear on my reputation as a lava demon warrior that I will pay you back as soon as I earn the money from the adventure today. Meg shook his head. He walked to the table and turned over the menu. There were 3 rules on it. I'm sorry, but the restaurant has rules. We don't accept any so-called reputation guarantees. We only accept cash. No credit. System, you're so smart. Meg praised the system in his mind when he saw the 3rd rule on the menu about no fighting and threatening the boss. The writing fee is 16 silver coins. Automatically deducted, the system said. Can you stop thinking about making money all day long? Can you be a little more serious? Mag couldn't help but complain in his heart. But Sargeras still didn't give up. He wanted to eat 10 of these Ruggiamos that could loosen the shackles. Apart from the effect, they were also the most delicious. Chapter 68. What's this? In the Aden Square outside the restaurant, a white-haired old man in a pure white magician's robe was resting under a large tree when he suddenly looked up with a surprised expression. His deep eyes narrowed slightly as he murmured to himself, "This magic wave. Could it be that it's from the elven race? No, it should be a human. That's not right either. Strange, strange. What is it? What a strange magic wave." Crassus Io hesitated for a moment. Then he picked up his staff, which was as tall as a man, and walked slowly toward the restaurant. He had been wandering in Chaos City for many days without finding anything. Maybe he could find a surprise here. In the restaurant, Sargeras looked at the menu on the table, Amy, who was encouraging him, and Meg, who didn't seem to want to negotiate. He sighed helplessly. Money is indeed important in this world. Although he felt that Meg was a little unreasonable, when he thought of the delicious and magical Ruggiamo, Sargeras felt that it was understandable that the owner of the Ruggiamo had some rules and temper. Besides, even this little girl could use such a terrifying fireball spell. Meg was very likely to be a powerful magic caster. But he looked so young and didn't wear any magic accessories, so it was easy to ignore him. When he was in the capital of the Roth Empire, he saw a white-haired old human magic caster who defeated a giant dragon with a fireball spell. He was very powerful. Later, he heard that the old magic caster was a consecrator of the royal family and one of the most powerful magic casters in the Roth Empire. He didn't remember the old magic caster's name. Okay, then I won't break the restaurant's rules. I'm Sargeras. I'll be back. Sargeras reached out his hand to Meg. Sargeras. Meg was a little confused. Although he wasn't a fan of games, he must have played World of Warcraft. He hesitated for a moment, and then asked, "Where's your Burning Legion?" "Huh?" Sargeras looked at Meg in confusion. "Looks like you just have the same name." Meg heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at Sargeras's hand with lava flowing out of it, he shook his head awkwardly. "It's nothing. I'm Meg. You're welcome to come again. But for the handshake, I still have work to do, so it's not suitable for me to bandage it." "Okay, Mr. Mac. Goodbye." Sargeras was stunned for a moment. He looked down at his hand and realized that even though he was a human mage, he was still human after all. He generously withdrew his hand, and when he turned around, his body temperature returned to normal. At least he wouldn't melt the door handle when he reached out to open the door. "Burning Legion?" Sargeras nodded thoughtfully as he exited the restaurant and strode toward the exit of the Aden Square. "Father, isn't Meg very powerful?" Amy looked up at Meg and asked, as if she was asking for credit. "Yes, Amy is super powerful. She's been a great help." Meg patted Amy's head with a smile. He felt that he was relying on Amy to put up a strong front. He didn't have any background or power, so he could only rely on this tiger's front for the time being. It wasn't a bad thing for the time being, but improving his strength was a rather urgent matter. Amy smiled happily, and her little face was full of satisfaction. "Mr. Mac, I'd like to order 2 new dishes." At this moment, the customer who had just entered the restaurant and hadn't ordered yet raised his hand carefully. His tone was rather polite. "I'll have 2 dishes too." "It's okay, you can take your time." The customer next to him also had an amiable smile. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded with a smile. He let Amy and Ugly Duckling play first while he strode quickly to the kitchen. "Looks like the magic wave just now was released by this little fellow, right?" Crassus stopped outside the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at Amy, who was holding an orange and white little beast in her arms. He was a little shocked, and then shook his head with a look of pity. He sighed and said, "What a pity. She was supposed to be a very talented prodigy, but the conflict between the 2 bloodlines ruined her. Otherwise, the purpose of this trip would have been achieved. This man is really a sinner. What a good piece of unpolished jade. Just a little bit of polishing, and she'll become a great treasure." Crassus was so angry that he stomped his feet. He hesitated to leave, but his eyes were fixed on Amy, and he couldn't move his feet. He just stood in front of the window like a fool. "Ugly Duckling, Do you think this white-bearded grandpa is standing there without moving because he doesn't have money, so he doesn't dare to come in? It's just like the little match girl. If he also sells matches, shouldn't we buy one for him? Amy also noticed Crassus standing outside the window. She walked closer with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and looked up and down at Crassus with her big eyes. She wanted to see if he had a little basket full of matches hidden in his robe. Meow tilde Ugly Duckling responded. It also looked up and down, although it didn't know what a match was. This little fellow is very intelligent. Although she's a half-elf, she might be a talent. Maybe I can get in touch with her. Crassus thought to himself as he looked at Amy, who had her hair tied up in 2 pigtails and was looking at him with her big blue eyes. She was very intelligent and very cute. However, he took a look at the busy restaurant and the timetable hanging on the door, and didn't rush into the restaurant. Instead, he stared at Amy and Ugly Duckling through the transparent glass for half an hour. When Meg was serving the dishes, he also noticed Crassus standing outside the window in a white magician robe. Compared to Julian, who was wearing a black magician robe and looked a little cold and gloomy, Crassus had long white hair and a long white beard. He was wearing a white magician robe and holding a light grey magician's staff. He was more in line with Xu Yangyi's imagination and aesthetics of magic casters. Amy stood for a while, and then sat down at a table near the window with Ugly Duckling in her arms. They continued to stare at each other without blinking. Their eyes didn't move at all except when they were collecting money. When it was almost 9 o'clock, there were fewer and fewer customers in the restaurant. The 64 Ruggiamos were sold out at 8:30. Many customers who didn't get to try them begged Meg to make more next time. Meg felt a little helpless. Of course, he wanted to make more Ruggiamos and sell them for more money. It seemed that he had to work harder from tomorrow onward. When there were only 3 customers left in the restaurant, Crassus looked away from Amy, walked to the door, and pushed it open. "Welcome," Meg said with a smile. He was the first magician to come to the restaurant. Chapter 69. The Grandpa Who Sells Matches. Meg was taken aback. Looking at Amy's sympathetic eyes, he suddenly remembered the story of the little match girl that he had told her before. It seemed that she had mistaken Crassus, who had been waiting outside the window for a long time, as a poor man who had no money to eat. However, this magic caster didn't look like a poor man. Judging from his demeanor and temperament, he was either an expert or someone who had been in a high position for a long time. He didn't show the slightest bit of surprise at the various furnishings in the restaurant, which showed that these things weren't rare to him. The so-called vision and background could often be seen from the small details. Yes, look at how pitiful he is. He has been waiting outside the window for so long, and no one has bought a match from him. Why don't we buy one for him? Amy nodded at Meg, and then looked at Crassus with pity, and comforted him. Grandpa, don't worry. Although you will starve to death even if we buy one match, you are still better off than that little girl who didn't even sell a match. You should be able to die without regrets. Crassus was a little taken aback by Amy's words. This little girl seemed to have misunderstood something. He shook his head with a smile, and said, "Little girl, I'm actually not selling. I know you must be cold and hungry, and want to eat roast goose, right?" Amy interrupted Crassus. She hugged Ugly Duckling and shrank back a little, and said with vigilance and difficulty, "But Ugly Duckling is still a baby. You can't eat it. You have to raise it." Meow. Ugly Duckling turned its head to look up at Amy with its eyes wide open. It realized that things weren't as simple as it seemed. Crassus was at a loss for words. He didn't seem to have said anything, and this little girl had put a strange identity on him. He had become a poor old man who wanted to eat roast goose even though he didn't have money to eat. Most importantly, what did this have to do with that cat-like little beast? Looking at the vigilant Amy, Meg almost burst out laughing. Seeing the awkward look on Crassus's face, he hurriedly said with a smile, "Sorry, Amy took my story seriously. What would you like to eat? The menu is on the table. You can check it yourself. Largi Ruggiamo is sold out." "All right." Crassus didn't think much of it. He sat down across from Amy and leaned his wand against the glass window behind him. He smiled kindly at Amy and picked up the menu on the table. His purpose of entering the restaurant was to test whether Amy had the talent to learn magic, and at the same time, to find out the intentions of the restaurant owner. However, asking such a question as soon as he sat down was obviously a bit abrupt. Of course, he wasn't worried that someone would refuse his request. As long as he revealed his identity, the people on the Norland continent who wanted to be his disciple could line up from the imperial palace to the gate of the capital. Accepting a half-elf as his disciple would put him under some pressure from the outside world, but he didn't care about that anymore after he was over 120 years old. Now, he just wanted to find a suitable disciple and pass on all he had learned in his life. As for whether the disciple was a human, an elf, or even a half-elf Crassus, he didn't care. They could say whatever they wanted. Who would dare to teach an old man like him a lesson? This restaurant was the most comfortable one he had been to in Chaos City these days. Of course, it was only comfortable. Compared with the imperial palace of the Roth Empire, it was far from luxurious. The restaurant had been very lively earlier. Since there were so many customers in such a corner, he thought that the restaurant must have a good variety of dishes. However, when he opened the menu, he found that there were only 2 dishes on it. Just now, the owner said that Laji Ruggiamo was sold out, which meant that only the top dish, Yongju fried rice, was available now. "Boss, what's this Yongju fried rice?" Crassus looked up at Meg and asked. He had lived for more than 120 years, and had never heard of this kind of food. And 600 copper coins was not cheap. 1 plate was enough to feed an ordinary family of 3 for 10 days. "It's super delicious. It's super delicious rainbow fried rice," Amy answered quickly. Then she looked at Crassus worriedly, and said, "I know you want to eat it, but we don't take matches. We only take cash. If you don't pay after eating it, I'll set you on fire." "Actually, I have money." Crassus smiled gently. An old, skinny hand reached out from his loose magician robe and laid flat on the table. There were 2 dragon coins in his palm. "Huh! Don't you sell matches?" Amy looked at the dragon coins in Crassus' hand with a puzzled expression. "I don't sell matches, but if you want, I can make a match for you." Crassus snapped his fingers on the table, and a match as thick as a pinky and 2 fingers long appeared on his fingertip. Mag looked at this scene with astonishment. This was a magic that was more advanced than magic. Creating something out of thin air was indeed an impressive feat compared to Amy's fireball, which could only cause destruction. Crassus' ability to make a match was more like a technical work. It was as if he had integrated magic into his daily life. He could do it so easily, he thought to himself. This must be a very powerful magician. "Wow. Do you know magic?" Amy looked at the match in Crassus' hand, and her eyes lit up. Crassus smiled and nodded. "I'm a magician. Of course I know magic. This is just a little trick. The real magic can drive back dragons and stop trolls. Do you want to learn it?" "Huh." Meg thought Crassus was going to order food. He didn't expect him to change the topic and try to persuade Amy to learn magic. This made him a little wary. Although Amy also wanted to learn magic, their identities were a little special, and they couldn't expose it yet. Meg secretly left the capital with Amy and came to Chaos City because he didn't want to live under the ridicule of those people. Those people left him alive that night because they wanted to see him make a fool of himself. But later, he faked a suicide scene, changed his appearance, and settled down here. For years had passed in the blink of an eye. Most people should have thought that they were dead, but the safety of the father and daughter was at stake, so they couldn't be too careful. Besides, Amy's magic talent was very likely inherited from her mother. If it was a talent unique to the Elven royal family, then it was even more important to find a trustworthy magic caster to be her teacher. "No, I don't want to." She pointed at Mag, and proudly said, "My father is also a super powerful magic caster. He conjured up a beautiful restaurant, and he can cook all kinds of delicious food. Can you do that?" Mag nodded. "That's right." Crassus was stunned. He really didn't know how to cook. However, when he looked up at Meg, Crassus didn't sense any magic waves from him. The restaurant was also built and decorated with ordinary materials. Although the materials used were much better than ordinary restaurants, it had nothing to do with magic. It seemed that the owner had told some lies in order to create a good image in his daughter's heart. Chapter 70. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg nodded and turned to the kitchen. He was quite satisfied with Amy's answer. At least the little girl didn't agree to teach her magic immediately. However, it seemed that this magic caster didn't intend to give up, so he was still a little wary. White-bearded grandpa, where are you from? Remi was sure that Crassus wasn't here to sell matches and that he had money on him, so she wasn't in a hurry to let him go. She asked curiously. My name is Crassus Io. I'm from Rhodu, the capital of the Roth Empire. It took me half a year to reach Chaos City, which is dozens of times bigger than Chaos City, Crassus said with a smile, trying to make his voice and expression as friendly as possible. If the people in the Tower of Offerings saw the usually serious and even rigid Lord Crassus talking to a little girl in such a friendly manner, they would be shocked speechless. Meg, who had just reached the kitchen door, suddenly stopped and couldn't help but clench his fists. Half of the powerful human magic casters were in Rhodu, the capital of the Roth Empire. The most powerful ones were enshrined in the glorious 36-story Magus Tower in the palace. These people were worshipped by the royal family, so that tower was also called the Tower of Offerings. 2 of the 3 magic casters who attacked him back then were from the Tower of Offerings, which meant that the incident was tacitly approved by the royal family, or at least, it was incited by some of the royal family. Although the incident had shaken the empire's military, the king ordered the Magus Tower to be reorganized, and 2 small fries from the royal family were thrown out as scapegoats to suppress the incident. Meg found the name Crassus in the memory of his predecessor. He was one of the magic casters enshrined in the royal family of the empire. It was said that he was more than 120 years old, and was a little mysterious and reclusive. He rarely stepped out of the Magus Tower, and never participated in any important events in the Roth Empire. Even the king couldn't do anything about him. As a knight, Meg didn't care much about mags, and had never seen Crassus before. Until now, he still didn't know if the incident back then was the result of a discussion among all the mags in the Mage Tower, or if the 2 mags were instructed to do so. But no matter what, Meg had to keep Amy away from Crassus. The Tower of Worship was too complicated, and Crassus, as one of the most senior magicians, must have heard about the incident back then. His judgment could not be underestimated. Furthermore, he was trying to entice Amy into joining Rhodu, and that made him feel a little uneasy. He definitely wasn't going to allow Amy to leave his side, and he definitely wasn't going to let her go to that lifeless Magus Tower in Rhodu. Having made up his mind, Meg went straight into the kitchen and started preparing the ingredients to make Yangju fried rice. Has he been walking for half a year? Amy raised her head and thought for a while. Just when Crassus thought she was going to ask Crassus what fun things there were in Rhodu, Amy sighed. She looked at Crassus, and said earnestly, White-bearded grandpa, you're already so old, but you've been walking for more than half a year. It's better for you to stay at home. If you fall on the road, other people will have to carry you back. That's so troublesome. Crassus almost choked on his own breath. If he took a horse-drawn carriage from Rhodu to Chaos City, it would take him about 20 days to get there every day. But his goal was to find a good seedling, so he took a lot of detours and visited many places along the way. He didn't expect Amy to be the best evidence that half of his leg was already in the ground. Actually, I know more powerful magic. Crassus tried to calm himself down, and tried to attract Amy's attention with magic again. Amy looked down at Ugly Duckling, and asked, Ugly Duckling, do you want to see it? Ugly Duckling glanced at Crassus, and shook its head. Amy also shrugged, and said, I don't want to see it, either. For the first time, Crassus felt that children weren't as gullible as he thought. Or rather, this half-elf girl was more difficult to deal with than he thought. She had a sharp tongue and a jumpy mind. She didn't follow the rules at all. Just when Crassus was thinking hard about how to make Amy interested in him, Meg came out with a plate of Yangju fried rice. He put it in front of him, and said with a smile, Your Yangju fried rice. What's this? Crassus looked at the colorful fried rice in front of him, and his eyes immediately lit up. Just like Amy said, the rice was as colorful as a rainbow, and it was fried into a plate. The rice wrapped in golden eggs and the various ingredients that were the size of rice grains had been cut into pieces by exquisite knife skills. The unique aroma of the eggs and the various ingredients made him swallow involuntarily. Such a rich aroma was even more enticing than the ones made by the chefs in the palace. Crassus, who had lost his appetite for many years, had an urge to try it. He picked up the spoon and put a spoonful into his mouth. The eggs wrapped in the rice were so tender, and the salty gravy flowed out of the ham after he bit into it. The taste of all the ingredients combined together made him feel as if his taste buds, which had been dormant for a long time, had been reborn. They were nourished by the delicious taste, and he was experiencing what it was like to be delicious again. However, when he bit into the rice wrapped in the egg, he suddenly opened his eyes. The rice was exceptionally sweet and refreshing, and had a comforting aroma that flowed down his throat and nourished every part of his body. It was this familiar smell that surprised and puzzled him. It was the smell of the spring of life. It was the holy spring of the elves. Years ago, when an interesting elf girl came to visit him, she brought him a small bottle of the spring of life. The smell left a deep impression on him, and it was the most important reason why he had been able to survive all these years. Even he had only tasted it 3 times in his life. The other 2 times were the benefits of being a consecrator of the royal family. It was a pity that the girl, such a good girl, had met the wrong person. Moreover, where did the smell of the spring of life come from in this young Jew fried rice? Did the owner pour the spring of life into the rice when he was cooking? Even if it was only a drop, it was still something incredible. Chapter 71. Crassus put down the spoon gently. There was not a single grain of rice left on the plate. He chewed the last mouthful of fried rice carefully, savoring the taste spreading in his mouth. After swallowing, it turned into a warm current, nourishing his almost dried-up flesh and blood. It was as if a new life force was blooming. Even if it was just the last radiance of the setting sun, it made him feel that life had become better. "Boss, give me another helping." Crassus put down the spoon and looked up at Meg. He couldn't remember how long it had been since he had the urge to have another bowl of fried rice, but today, he felt that he could have another bowl. "I'm sorry, sir. The opening hours for this morning have ended, and it's been more than 3 minutes. You can come back during other opening hours." Meg shook his head slightly. The clock on the wall was already pointing to 9:03. His expression showed that there was no room for negotiation. Crassus looked at Meg, took out 3 dragon coins, and put them on the table gently. "I just want another helping. I'm willing to pay double." "Sorry, this is the restaurant's rule." Meg still shook his head. If it were an old man, he might have made an exception and agreed. But since it was Crassus, he couldn't wait for him to leave as soon as possible. In his opinion, this was a somewhat dangerous person. "Father." Amy looked up at Meg, a little hesitant. She felt that the white-bearded grandpa looked quite pitiful, and even offered double the price. But when she saw Meg's expression, she swallowed the rest of her words. "Okay, come back at noon for the next helping." Crassus looked at Meg deeply to make sure that he wasn't expecting him to continue raising the price. He reached out and put away the 2 dragon coins. Although he wanted to ask about the spring of life, he hesitated and decided to bring it up later. He straightened his magician's robe and sat up a little. He looked at Meg and said, "Boss, apart from that, I have something to discuss with you. I'm Crassus, a 10th-tier magician from the Roth Empire. As I'm getting old, I want to take in a disciple to inherit my legacy. I just sensed a strange magic wave from this little girl. Can you let me check her talent? Maybe she and I are fated." Meg's pupils contracted. A 10th-tier magic caster was the most powerful magic caster on the Norland continent. There were no more than 15 10th-tier magic casters on the entire continent. There were only 4 or 5 worshippers in the Roth Empire, but this Crassus shouldn't have been on the list. However, judging from his expression, it was as if he was talking about something normal, and didn't seem to be lying. "If you want to take Amy as your disciple, are you planning to bring her back to Rodu?" Meg asked calmly as he looked at Crassus. Crassus nodded. "Yes, there are many tools in the Mage Tower that are suitable for beginners to practice magic. There is also a complete magic room there, which makes it easier for the learner to become familiar with magic. As my apprentice, she has the right to enter the Mage Tower. It is the holy land in the hearts of all magicians. The Mage Tower was a revered place in the hearts of most magic casters on the Norland continent. The Mage Tower was an important reason why Rodu was able to retain a terrifying number of magic casters. Even a normal person should know what it meant to enter the Mage Tower, so he wasn't worried that Meg would refuse. Meg shook his head without any hesitation. Sorry, I don't want Amy to leave my side, and I won't let her go to Rodu alone, so I don't think we're fated. Yes, I won't leave father. Amy nodded. She sat down in her chair and reached out to grab one of Meg's fingers. This. Crassus faltered. He was a 10th-tier magic caster and a worshipper of the Roth Empire. He wanted to test Amy. If she met the requirements, he could take her as his disciple and bring her back to the Rodu Magus Tower to learn magic. Even the nobles in the imperial capital would go crazy over such an offer. He didn't think that he would be rejected by the owner of a small restaurant in Chaos City. Along the way, Crassus had seen a lot of potential candidates. Many people even wanted to send their children to him, even if they wanted to be apprentices. Crassus didn't even need to reveal his identity. However, Meg didn't even want to give him a chance to test Amy. He was a little surprised by this, but he didn't lose his composure. He smiled again and said, "Boss, you're in Chaos City, so you might not know much about magic casters. The Magus Tower, you want Amy to leave me? That's enough. I don't want to know anything else." Meg cut off Crassus. He glanced at his watch and said with a polite smile, "Sorry, sir. We still have to go out to buy some goat's milk for the little one. If you don't have anything else to say, please come back during the next opening hours." "That's right. Ugly Duckling is starving." Amy stroked Ugly Duckling's head and nodded. She took out 4 gold coins from her pocket and put them on the table. Then, she took away the dragon coin and said to Crassus, "White-bearded grandpa, you're so thin. It's a waste to eat too much. Anyway, you won't grow any taller. Let's save it for the next meal. Here's your change." Crassus had mixed feelings. If others knew that he was rejected because he didn't care about a little kitten and goat's milk, no one would believe it. Although he hadn't accepted any disciples along the way, almost everyone respected him very much and wanted to give him money to test Amy. But now, something like this had happened. Furthermore, the father and daughter were sending him off in unison. They didn't have any intention of negotiating at all. "All right, I'll come back next time." After being rejected for the first time, Crassus reluctantly put away the gold coins on the table, picked up his magic staff, and walked toward the door. "Be careful of the stairs, white-bearded grandpa. If you fall, you won't be able to get up," Amy said to Crassus, who was holding the door handle. Crassus' hand suddenly froze. He turned around abruptly to look at Amy, who had a worried look on her little face. He seemed to see the elf girl from all those years ago. At that time, he was holding onto the windowsill on the 32nd floor of the Magus Tower and coughing violently. His life was about to come to an end. Suddenly, a crisp and worried voice sounded from behind him. "Be careful of the windowsill, white-bearded grandpa. If you fall, you might smash someone to death." Chapter 72. The girl stared at him for a while, and then threw a small gourd at him helplessly. She said it was spring water from her home, and it would help to quench his thirst. Then, she continued to climb upstairs. The Magus Tower wasn't a place that anyone could enter, especially outsiders. It was a forbidden area. However, Crassus wanted to feel some care and warmth before he left this world, so he opened the gourd and took a sip. Only then did he realize that it was the milk of life, which was even more precious than the spring of life. There were only 3 drops, but it was those 3 drops of milk of life that had extended his life for more than 10 years. She really gave such a precious thing to an old man whom she didn't even know. She didn't even ask for his name, as if it was a gourd of spring water from her home. He later found out that she was the princess of the elves, the only heir to the throne. She did bring the milk of life from her home, and thought it was just right to quench his thirst. She gave it to him when she saw him coughing so badly. That was the first time she came to the Roth Empire. She came with an elven minister for a friendly visit. Somehow, she fooled the guards at the entrance of the Magus Tower and went all the way up to the 36th floor. On the top floor, she wrote the elven princess was here before she went down the tower with satisfaction. Because of her special status, the king couldn't blame her. He even left the line of green words on the top of the Magus Tower for her as a proof of the peace and friendship between the two races. Okay. Crassus collected his thoughts and nodded at Amy with a smile. Maybe it was because she was half-elven, but this little girl's eyebrows did resemble her. He pushed open the door and walked out of the restaurant. He hadn't received greetings from the elves for a few years. All news about that incident had been blocked, and he had only heard about it. General Alex had died in the demon's ambush, and there had been no news about her in the past few years. Apart from a small group of people who stood at the top of the two races, no one would connect the two incidents. Seems like the owner doesn't want the little girl to leave him. Is he asking him to go to the Magus Tower with her? Crassus looked back at the restaurant and murmured. He walked away slowly with his staff. How did this guy come out of the coffin tower? Not far away, Julian was standing at the entrance of the magic potion shop in his black robe. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at the receding Crassus with a ball of dark green flames dancing in his hand. He suddenly turned to look at the restaurant nearby, where Meg was walking out with Amy, who was holding Ugly Duckling in her arms. His gaze fell on Amy, and his brows furrowed even deeper as he murmured to himself, could it be that that old bastard wants to take this little girl as his disciple? Meg also noticed Julian's gaze from afar. Although he knew that Amy was a genius, the feeling of being stared at by others still made him feel inexplicably uncomfortable. Besides, Crassus looked more decent. The status of a royal consecrator was an honor, but it also represented a responsibility and restraint. His neighbor, who was wearing a black mage robe, gave him the feeling that he was a dark mage. Whether it was his appearance, his voice, or his slow movements, they all exuded a sinister aura. Good morning, Grandpa Turtle. Good morning, Black Coal, Green Pea. Amy stopped in her tracks and greeted him with a smile. Turtle. Meg raised an eyebrow. Although Julian was a little hunchbacked, most people didn't like to be given a nickname because of that. It could be said that it was a little impolite. Amy might not understand, but he couldn't just let it go like that. He was just about to apologize. Morning. Julian looked up at him in response. His voice sounded like two pieces of metal rubbing against each other, and it was a little harsh and scary. Meg swallowed his words. It seemed that he didn't dislike it. However, he felt like he had just seen Crassus gaze. If he also wanted to take Amy as his disciple, then he would have a headache. Black Coal still had 2 leaves on its body, and it leaned over to look at Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms. Amy, what's that ugly thing in your arms? It's clearly much cuter than you, but aren't cats only white and black? Why is it orange and white? Green Pea also leaned over, and gave Black Coal a disdainful look before asking curiously. Meow. Ugly Duckling meowed at Black Coal, and stretched out its little pink paws as if it wanted to show off its sharp claws. However, even its meow now had a soft, baby voice. A cat. Black Coal jumped back in shock. However, when he looked at Ugly Duckling in Amy's arms, he raised his head proudly, and said, the esteemed Fommer Odin Ben wouldn't be afraid of an ugly kitten with an abnormal color. It's not a cat. It's Ugly Duckling. Amy shook her head, and stroked Ugly Duckling's head to comfort it. She looked at Black Coal, and said, Black Coal, you're clearly the ugliest here. Ugly Duckling can only be ranked second now. Furthermore, it can grow up. Black Coal became a little nervous upon hearing that. He looked at Ugly Duckling, who was wagging its little tail proudly in Amy's arms, and said with disdain, I'm not afraid of this little thing. With its short legs, do you think it can jump so high into the cage? Besides, it grew up in a restaurant. You're going to die of fat. Let's go, Amy. I still have to go back to the restaurant to prepare the ingredients. Meg smiled as he stroked Amy's head. The ingredients for the Laji meat mask had to be prepared in advance, and he felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by Julian. Goodbye. Amy waved her hand, and left with Meg. Maybe I can also check her out. If she's suitable for dark magic, it would be interesting to steal a disciple from that old guy Crassus. Julian murmured to himself as he watched Amy's back. Meg bought some goat's milk from the market, and filled a bottle for Amy and Ugly Duckling. Seeing the two little ones sucking happily, he poured a cup for himself and drank it. Although strengthening one's body couldn't be completed in a day or two, he could still feel his strength slowly increasing. Meg looked at the mission progress chart in his mind as he kneaded the dough. He didn't have to worry about the mission of selling 1,000 Rugiamos. With his current progress, he could complete it in about 6 days. However, there were only 10 more customers in the restaurant in the morning, which meant that there were only 10 new customers. There were too many old customers, and this growth rate made him a little anxious. I have to improve my efficiency. It takes too much time to order and serve food. Amy obviously can't handle these two tasks. It's about time to hire someone, Meg thought. Chapter 73. In the end, Meg decided to improve his own efficiency. If he wanted to limit his purchases, he would have to limit the number of takeouts. Instead of squeezing the customers, he would have to let more people in. However, this was an alternate world, after all, so Meg still had a very important problem to consider. If there were customers with huge appetites like giant dragons and forest trolls in the future, they might be able to buy the restaurant's entire supply for a day. Should he be forced to limit his supply, or should he ask the system for a bigger oven and make extra large Rugiamos? He had to think about it when he was free. After all, even Sargeras had ordered 10 Rugiamos in one sitting. Of course, the main reason was that he was selling single items. He had to make every single item by himself. If there were semi-buffet dishes like hot pot and spicy soup, he would be able to save a lot of effort. There was a recruitment agency in the Aden Square. Businesses and people looking for jobs could go to the agency. It had formed a complete industrial chain. It was said that as long as the price was right, any kind of employee could be found. Mag decided to wait for the restaurant's first rest day to come in 2 days, and then he would go to the intermediary to take a look. It didn't matter if the salary was higher, but he had to find someone who was reliable, hardworking, and not talkative, and could do his job well. He had sold out 64 Rugiamos in an hour in the morning, and the lunchtime was half an hour longer. Therefore, Meg planned to make more Rugiamos at noon. If he could make 16 more Rugiamos, he might be able to attract more customers. After drinking the goat's milk, Ugly Duckling fell asleep. Maybe it was because of it, Amy also fell asleep on the counter. Meg looked at Amy's back through the glass window, and a smile appeared on his face. Although there were all kinds of races in this alternate world, he had been living a comfortable life these days. He didn't feel threatened. Under the management of the Grey Temple, Chaos City was very safe. This was why Meg Alex had chosen to come to Chaos City when he was almost disabled. The order established in the chaos made the weak feel more comfortable and safe than the rules established by money and power in the territories of other races. At noon, as usual, they had their lunch in advance. Meg chose to ignore Ugly Duckling's resentful gaze. In any case, he couldn't give it any food right now. Meanwhile, Amy was enjoying her meal right in front of Ugly Duckling. Sometimes, she would even place the spoon in front of it for a while, but she just wouldn't let it have a taste. It was so hungry that it began to beg Amy to let it have a taste. With just this bit of backbone, it seems like you won't be able to become a master in this lifetime. Meg looked at Ugly Duckling, which was begging Amy for food, and heaved an internal sigh. In terms of training, Amy was indeed better than Ugly Duckling. She had managed to train an orange cat to the point where it didn't have any temper. It's useless even if you beg me. Anyway, you can't eat rainbow fried rice right now. I'm seducing you on purpose. Amy smiled happily. She scooped up another spoonful and waved it in front of Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling slowly turned its face away, as if doubting its life as a cat. After lunch, they cleared the plates. Meg poured a bottle of goat's milk for Ugly Duckling. When he passed the bottle to it, Ugly Duckling bared its teeth and showed him its teeth in all directions, as if to remind him that its teeth were all grown out. It's growing quite fast. Looking at its little teeth, Meg was a little surprised. But before Ugly Duckling could be happy, he shook his head again and said, "But it's still not enough. It has to be at least a week before it can eat complimentary food and drink milk for 2 more days." Ugly Duckling was instantly disheartened. It bit its pacifier unhappily and turned its face away from Meg and Amy. It drank its milk silently. Looking at these two fellows, it felt really bad. The number of diners at noon was even more than Meg had expected. Because the restaurant was located in a remote area, it was inconvenient for customers who had a short lunch break to come. Moreover, a meal cost at least 300 copper coins, and not everyone could afford 3 meals a day. So, at noon, the restaurant finally welcomed a small wave of new customers. Over there, over there. Park the carriages further away. Don't spoil the customer's appetite. Don't you see that big transparent crystal? It's so that the customers can see the beautiful scenery of the Aden Square. Harrison got down from the carriage and waved his chubby arms to guide the carriages behind him to stop in the distance. 5 well-dressed young masters got off the carriages. They were basically the same size, with thick legs, bucket waists, and necks almost as thick as their heads. The 6 of them stood in a circle, looking like 6 fat brothers. "Harrison, you sent us a letter saying that you would take us to a new restaurant tonight. Not only is it delicious, but it can also help us lose weight. Is this the restaurant?" One of the fat men in yellow asked Harrison with a puzzled expression. The restaurant's decor was indeed one of the more high-end restaurants in the Aden Square, but these self-proclaimed foodies never cared about the environment of the restaurant. They often patronized roadside stalls with good food. There were indeed many customers in the restaurant at this time, but looking through the transparent crystal, most of the customers were of normal size. If it really could help them lose weight, then why were these skinny people here? Harrison's best friends all came from well-to-do families. The yellow-robed family owned 3 inns, while the green-robed family owned the most popular tea shop in Chaos City. In any case, they didn't have to worry about making a living since they were born, and could even get quite a bit of pocket money every day. Usually, they would eat, drink, and play together. If anyone found a place with good food or fun, they would share it immediately. Therefore, after receiving Harrison's invitation yesterday, they agreed to taste the amazing food that Harrison mentioned this afternoon. Yes, this is the restaurant. But the weight loss effect is only effective for people of our size. Don't say that I didn't explain it clearly later. Harrison nodded. He looked in the direction of the restaurant and lowered his voice, saying, "Remember, don't mess with the restaurant owner's daughter. Even orcs and demons have to be afraid of her. She's that scary." Everyone was shocked to hear that. Harrison was one of the boldest people in the group, but now he was so afraid of the restaurant owner's daughter. They all nodded. "Let's go in. I'm hungry." Harrison pushed open the door and entered the restaurant, and the others followed him. The 6 fat men, who weighed more than 100 kilograms on average, walked in one after another. The light outside dimmed and cast a row of shadows, attracting the attention of the customers who were eating. Chapter 74. Ugly Duckling poked its head out of Amy's arms and stared at them with wide eyes. It was the first time it had seen so many fat men, and its eyes were full of curiosity. Meg, who had just come out with 4 Ruggiamos, was also a little surprised. Harrison had said he would bring his friends here, and he didn't expect that he would really bring 5 of them today. However, as Mag looked at these 6 unusual customers, the image of them happily eating Ruggiamos with their fat jiggling all over their bodies flashed through his mind. The picture was so beautiful that Meg didn't dare to keep thinking about it. However, he was quite happy to have 5 new guests. "Mr. Mac, I'd like 3 Ruggiamos, please." Harrison sat down at a table and said to Meg as if he was familiar with him. Since he had Ruggiamos at noon yesterday, he had eaten 3 meals in the restaurant for the past 2 days. He had woken up a little late this morning, so he didn't get to eat Ruggiamos, so he made an appointment with them at noon a little earlier. They arrived shortly after the restaurant opened for business. "Okay, please wait a moment." Meg nodded and turned to go into the kitchen. They divided into 2 groups and sat down at a table of 3. "It smells so good." The fat man in yellow couldn't help taking a few deep breaths as soon as he sat down. He looked around, trying to find the source of the aroma. Yeah, what meat is this? How can it smell so good? The aroma of the meat in the air made everyone swallow their saliva. They couldn't help but ask Harrison. Different from the aroma of roast meat, this aroma was more enticing. However, their eyes were soon attracted by the Ruggiamo in the hands of the small-eyed man sitting at the next table. The tantalizing aroma of the meat wafted over. There was a white cake in the brown paper bag, and there seemed to be a thick layer of meat in it. He squinted his eyes and took a big bite with both hands. He chewed happily and then swallowed slowly. Gulp. Everyone swallowed their saliva almost at the same time. What's this? I want that, too. They all turned to look at Harrison and asked eagerly. It was too torturous for foodies to watch others eat in front of them. This is the legendary Largi Ruggiamo, the delicacy that I strongly recommend for you today. Harrison said calmly. Looking at everyone's expressions, he was actually overjoyed. He just liked seeing them act like they had never seen the world. Boss, I want 3 Largi Ruggiamos. I want 3 too. Me too. As soon as Harrison finished speaking, everyone had already raised their hands to order. Their appetites were relatively similar, so they all chose to order according to Harrison's portion. Okay, please wait a moment. Meg placed a plate of Yangju fried rice in front of a customer, then turned around and went back into the kitchen. When he was busy, he was no different from a spinning top. What's that colorful thing? It also looks delicious. The red-clothed fatty looked at the Yangju fried rice and asked curiously. It's rainbow fried rice. It's super delicious. Amy, who was sitting behind the counter, responded. She looked at the 2 tables of the winter melon core and found it very interesting. Everyone looked over at the same time. When they saw Amy, who looked delicate and cute, sitting behind the counter with a strange-colored kitten in her arms, their eyes lit up. It was rare to see such a cute little girl. Although she looked like a half-elf, the pure-blooded elves they usually saw were not so cute. That's the boss's daughter. Harrison reminded them in a low voice, covering his mouth with his hand. This morning, he saw with his own eyes that Remi only threw a fireball and made the lava troll admit defeat. Although she looked delicate and cute on the surface, she was actually a little witch through and through. What a cute little girl. She's not as scary as you say. Demons, orcs, and so on must have admitted defeat because she's so cute. The blue-clothed fatty waved his hand. He didn't believe that the harmless-looking Amy could be scary at all. That's right, that's right. I've never seen such a cute little girl. The red-clothed fatty next to him also nodded. Okay, it's up to you. Harrison put his hand to his forehead and felt a headache coming on. It seemed that it would not be easy to convince them that Amy was really scary. Little boss, then I'll have a super delicious rainbow fried rice, the blue-clothed fatty said with a smile. He looked at Amy with a smile. Gyurge Francois was the oldest among them. His family had several ironware workshops and shops. He was now in charge of 2 of them, but he usually had nothing to do, so he just followed Harrison and the others. But unlike them, he already had a wife and 3 sons, the oldest of whom was already 5 years old. Gyurge had always wanted a cute little daughter, but he had 3 sons in a row. Now, his 4th son was already in his wife's womb. His wife said that if this one was a boy, he should marry a concubine. Anyway, she was not going to give birth anymore. Whoever wanted to give birth could do it. Of course, he didn't dare to marry a concubine. After all, his wife, who had always been gentle, was holding a pair of scissors behind her back when she said that. If it weren't for his sharp eyes, he probably wouldn't be able to think about anything in the future. Because of this resentment and expectation, he usually liked other girls. After seeing Amy, he was even more envious of Meg. He was so lucky to have such a cute daughter. Okay. Amy nodded, then turned to the kitchen and said, Father, Uncle Blue Fatty wants a rainbow fried rice. Fut Harrison and the others burst out laughing. Although they were about the same size, they were still very happy to see Gyurge being given such a nickname. Gyurge was stunned, and his expression became a little strange. Uncle Blue Fatty, what kind of nickname is this? But looking at Amy's cute and serious expression, he just couldn't get angry. Even he wanted to laugh. Uncle's yellow fatty, green fatty, red fatty, Green fatty, and grey fatty, what are you laughing about? Amy asked curiously as she looked at everyone who was convulsing with laughter. Everyone's laughter stopped abruptly. They looked at each other's clothes, and their expressions became a little interesting. This girl is indeed not as simple as she looks. This was the thought that flashed through everyone's mind at the same time. They were really angry and wanted to laugh at the same time. Ha ha ha, red fatty. Harrison was the first to lose it. He looked at the fat man in red opposite him and laughed. Grey fatty, don't talk. The fat man in red was speechless. He also wanted to laugh. I can't. Why do I still want to laugh even though I'm being mocked? If it were in the past, we would have flipped the table. The fat man in yellow was a little puzzled as he tried to hold back his laughter. Chapter 75. Meg made 2 Ruggiamos for Harrison first. The Ruggiamos were put into the pot in batches, so they couldn't be cooked all at once. The rest had to be cooked out slowly. Besides, Ruggiamos were best eaten while they were hot. The delicious gravy was still in the pot, and didn't affect the soft and crisp texture of the Ruggiamos. Therefore, even if the customers ordered more than 1 Ruggiamos at the same time, Meg would serve them in batches. Of course, those who ordered first got first. Please enjoy. Meg nodded with a smile, and turned to the kitchen. The customers who had ordered Yangju fried rice had been waiting for a while. This smell. The fat man in red sitting opposite Harrison smelled the rich aroma of the meat, and his eyes widened. Looking at Harrison, who was holding a Ruggiamo in each hand, he said expectantly, Harrison, let me have a bite first. I want one, too. The fat man in cyan leaned over and said. Looking at the meat in the Ruggiamos, he was full of hunger. No. Harrison shook his head without hesitation. If it were anything else, he would have shared it with everyone, but Ruggiamos were out of the question. He had endured the whole morning without eating Ruggiamos. Although the Yangju fried rice tasted good, it was far from the flying feeling brought by the Ruggiamos. Looking at the customers who were looking at him eagerly, he said with a smile, wait for your turn. I'll start first. Is it really that good? The customers thought curiously. Harrison was always easy to talk to. Usually, when he went out for a meal, he would be happy to share his food with everyone if it was served first. But today, he didn't even let them have a bite, which made them look forward to it even more. Harrison raised the Ruggiamo in his right hand and took a big bite. Feeling the delicious flavor melting on the tip of his tongue, he couldn't help but close his eyes with a pleasant smile on his face. This feeling made him feel so happy. Gulp. The customers' eyes were fixed on him. When they saw him swallow the Ruggiamo with satisfaction, they couldn't help swallowing. Although they couldn't feel the delicious feeling, they knew it must be very delicious since Harrison, who was always picky, could smile so contentedly. After a mouthful of Ruggiamo, Harrison felt as if he had been electrified. The fat all over his body began to tremble slightly under the influence of his blood. Fine beads of sweat appeared on his face, but he looked even more delighted. He took another big bite, and his body couldn't help but shake. Is this the effect of losing weight? Everyone who came with him looked surprised when they saw this scene. When Harrison said that he could lose weight, they didn't believe it, but now it seemed like it was true. The customers sitting nearby also noticed Harrison's trembling fat. They looked at the Ruggiamos in their hands in surprise, and then at the Ruggiamos in Harrison's hands. They didn't feel anything different, but why did they only feel a little restless after eating the Ruggiamos? It wasn't as exaggerated as Harrison's. The customers watched Harrison finish the Ruggiamo eagerly. After many swallowing mouthfuls of saliva, Meg finally came out with 5 Ruggiamos and gave one to each customer. They came together, and they were all craving the Ruggiamos. Of course, they didn't care about who ate first. After eating more than 50 kilograms, they were really good friends. Ugly duckling, watch carefully. It's going to be spectacular when those 6 winter melons shake. Amy held Ugly Duckling in her arms and watched with wide eyes. She also held Ugly Duckling a little higher. Meg, who had just walked to the counter, couldn't help but stop and look back. It wasn't easy to gather 6 customers of the same size, and they all ordered Ruggiamos at the same time. They held the Ruggiamos in their hands and looked at them carefully. They cut them down the middle and stuffed them with minced meat. Although they boasted that they had eaten all over Chaos City, this was the first time they had seen this kind of Ruggiamos. Tempted by the aroma and Harrison's eating style, they all picked up the Ruggiamos and took a bite almost at the same time. Harrison, who had just finished one Ruggiamo, looked at them and smiled. They would love it after tasting it. He took a big bite of the second Ruggiamo. Ah, 6 long exclamations of admiration sounded almost at the same time. Although they weren't very loud, they were surprisingly in tune, and attracted a lot of customers' attention. The customers who had tasted Ruggiamos all knew that the sound they made when they swallowed for the first time was completely out of their control. It was the most realistic reaction of the body. It was the feeling that they couldn't control themselves. Therefore, they didn't feel disgusted by it. Instead, they felt like watching others make a fool of themselves like they did. However, the customers who turned their heads around were soon stunned. The 6 customers who had taken big bites of Ruggiamos started to tremble from their calves to their thighs, then to their stomachs and necks. Their fat was trembling like waves. The 6 of them sat close to each other, creating the feeling of waves. The customers wanted to laugh, but they didn't think it was appropriate to laugh out loud, so they had to hold it in. Looking at the huge waves, they couldn't take their eyes off them. The small-eyed man next to them was blushing. If he hadn't been worried that his laughter would be drowned out by the fat people, he would have laughed out loud. It's fun, it's fun. Amy clapped her little hands happily. This was the most interesting reaction she had ever seen. It was so funny that so many soft and fat uncles couldn't control their fat from trembling. Meow. Ugly Duckling raised its little pink paw to cover its eyes. These guys are so scary. This scene is indeed more beautiful than I thought. Jiang Hong couldn't help laughing. He hurriedly turned and walked to the kitchen. Ruggiamos were very effective for customers who were too fat. After the news spread, Ruggiamos would win the favor of a group of foodies. The customers didn't care what others thought of them at all. They were completely immersed in the delicious Ruggiamos. They felt their fat trembling and moving as they experienced unprecedented delicious enjoyment. Gyurge slowly put down the bag in his hand, still looking a little unsatisfied. He couldn't help but exclaim, eating delicious food and losing weight at the same time, only a god could invent such a miraculous food, right? Mr. Mac is indeed a genius. Harrison nodded in agreement. He was 70% full after 2 Ruggiamos. One more and he would be full. Chapter 76. Mag shook his head with a smile as he listened to the praises outside. Of course, he wasn't a genius. No genius would learn how to make Ruggiamo for 100 days without sleep or rest. He just had the system, and he was more diligent, that's all. However, being able to let the customers eat happily and listen to their praise still made them feel pretty good. This feeling of being recognized was much better than being chased or insulted in the past. This Ruggiamo is so good. Is there anything else in this restaurant other than the rainbow fried rice? While waiting for the second Ruggiamo, Gyurge picked up the menu on the table and flipped it open expectantly. To his surprise, there were only 2 dishes on it. When he saw the price, he blurted out, Yangju fried rice, 600 copper coins for a plate. Laji Ruggiamo, 300 copper coins. Why is it so expensive? Bro, if we go somewhere else, we won't be able to eat such delicious and weight-loss Ruggiamos even with 10 gold coins. We've made a profit with only 3 gold coins, Harrison said with a smile. Yeah, I'll order 2 more even if it's 30 gold coins, let alone 3 gold coins. The fat man in red nodded and put down the empty bag reluctantly. Bro, aren't you always free to spend money? Why do you think the Ruggiamo is expensive today? The fat man in cyan asked curiously. The others also looked at Gyurge with puzzlement. The Ruggiamo was so delicious, and it was on a diet. 300 copper coins for 1 Ruggiamo was a great deal. Gyurge was in charge of 2 blacksmith shops, and his daily net income was at least 200 gold coins. Usually, people would rush to pay for the Ruggiamo. It's not that I don't think the Ruggiamo is worth the price. Gyurge hurriedly waved his hand and explained awkwardly, "It's because my wife is pregnant. She's been paranoid that I've been seeing other women. She only gives me 3 gold coins a day as pocket money. This Ruggiamo costs 3 gold coins, so I can only eat one. That's why I'm worried." "See? Karma will come to you if you keep showing off your wife," the fat man in cyan said with a gloating smile. "But I'm more curious. Do you really have other women?" Harrison asked with a teasing tone. "Do you even need to ask? Sister-in-law already has him completely under her control. He's already guilty of looking at other women outside, so there's no way he's looking for other women." The red-clothed fatty curled his lips, looking as if he had seen through everything. "Now I think it was a wise choice to turn down the marriage arranged by my father the day before yesterday." The fat man in cyan nodded happily. "All right, you guys don't even have wives. My wife gave birth to 3 sons for me, and she's pregnant now. I know you're all jealous." Gyurge smiled proudly. "Then it's probably still a son, but you like daughters." Harrison shrugged and exposed him mercilessly. "Take back your words. If it's really a son, I'll send all 4 of my sons to chase after you no matter if it's a daughter or a son. I'll make you feel real despair." Gyurge looked at Harrison with a serious expression. "Brother, don't be like this. I'll panic. It's a daughter. It must be a daughter in sister-in-law's stomach. Tell those naughty brats of yours to stay away from my daughter in the future." Harrison hurriedly waved his hand in horror. "Then you have to show some sincerity. Lend me 10 gold coins first." Gyurge reached out his hand to Harrison. "All right, you can eat to your heart's content today. I'll pay for you later. We're brothers." Harrison pushed Gyurge's hand away with a smile. "No, I'm going to bring some back for your sister-in-law. She hasn't had much of an appetite recently. I was going to accompany her at home today, but I heard you say there's something super delicious, so I came to see if there's anything suitable for her. I can't let you pay for it." Gyurge was still reaching out his hand with an embarrassed smile. "TSK, TSK. Brother, you're such a good man. Sister-in-law treated you so badly, but you still want to bring her good food." Harrison was a little emotional, but he still took out a dragon coin from his money pouch and handed it to Gyurge. "This is nothing. She almost lost her life when she was giving birth to my eldest son. I already told her not to give birth, but she knew I wanted a daughter, so she gave birth to my 2nd son. The next year, she gave birth to my 3rd son. She's pregnant with my 4th son now. If I don't pamper a wife like her and fool around, I deserve to be struck by lightning." Gyurge accepted the dragon coin with a smile. Everyone was silent. They had known each other for years, so they naturally knew these things. Although they often made fun of Gyurge for being afraid of his wife, they still respected their sister-in-law. "Then you can't bring this Ruggiamo for her. If she eats it, she'll probably go into labor today. That would ruin everything. His Yangju fried rice is very good. It's very mild and nourishing. You can bring one for her. Maybe it'll be good for the baby." Harrison nodded. "Okay, then I'll bring her a Yangju fried rice. Is this the rainbow fried rice that little girl was talking about?" Gyurge glanced at Amy, who was sitting behind the counter. "Yes, but I don't know if the owner will let me take it out." Harrison nodded. He was a little unsure. He could take the Ruggiamo away with him, but it would be a little strange to take the fried rice away with him. "Boss, can I take a Yangju fried rice away with me?" Gyurge asked Meg, who came out with the Ruggiamo. "Take it out." Meg put the Ruggiamo on the table and was a little surprised. In the past 2 days, there had been customers who were in a hurry to eat Ruggiamos while walking, but none of them had asked to take the Yangju fried rice away. If they did, they would have to buy a takeout box from the system. "My wife is more than 6 months pregnant, and she doesn't want to eat anything these days. Harrison said the owner's Yangju fried rice is very good, so I want to take one back. Maybe she'll eat some." Gyurge nodded sincerely, but he was a little nervous. Some restaurants didn't allow customers to take out food. Meg looked at Gyurge. He didn't expect him to be a good husband. He always thought that people who loved their wives deserved respect. He asked in his mind, "System, can pregnant women eat Yangju fried rice?" The Yangju fried rice provided by the system is non-toxic and harmless. It's suitable for the old, the young, the sick, the disabled, and the young. There's no situation where it's inedible, the system answered calmly. After a short pause, it added, but pregnant women shouldn't eat largi Ruggiamo. Meg was relieved. He continued, then make me a takeout box. Use the same logo as the one on the Ruggiamo bag. It'd be better if the style is the same. It'd be better if it's all brown. Anyway, it'd be better if it's the kind that people can remember at first sight. Chapter 77. 5 copper coins for the Ruggiamo bag, and 10 for the takeout box, Meg said calmly. The system's dissatisfaction? That's not part of the deal. 20 copper coins. The system was silent for a while, and then argued, the host can earn 300 copper coins for a plate of Yangju fried rice. Even if you deduct the cost of the takeout box, you still have 280 copper coins left. The system designed the takeout box with the ability of a top designer, and the logo with the ability of a top painter. All the materials are pollution-free, self-degrading, and can be used many times. 5 copper coins. Meg casually threw out his new offer, and then said calmly, System, do you believe that he won't be dissatisfied if I tell him to take the plate and leave? And he'll even wash the plate and send it back to me tomorrow? Remember, this is a buyer's market. 300 copper coins is still too little for me. 10 copper coins, deal. The system's crisp voice sounded with a bit of grievance and helplessness. The takeout box is being made. The first batch will be delivered in 5 minutes. Very good. Meg was satisfied with the system's efficiency. He turned to George and said with a smile, Okay, but you'll have to add 20 copper coins to the takeout box. 20 copper coins? Okay, please pack one for me. I won't take my own. George thought for a while, and then nodded. Although other restaurants usually didn't charge extra for takeout, it was still acceptable to add 20 copper coins to the takeout box since a plate of Yangju fried rice already cost 600 copper coins. As long as the Yangju fried rice was as good as Ruggiamo, and he could let his wife eat more, it wouldn't be a problem to double the price. Please wait a moment. Tang Sanzang nodded, turned around, and went into the kitchen, ignoring the system's roaring voice in his head. He was better at making money than he thought. He was just lazy in his previous life. George and the others continued to eat the second Ruggiamo, enjoying the delicious taste and the feeling of fat exercise. This slightly spicy meat wave also attracted the attention of the customers who had just entered the restaurant. However, the happy and enjoyable expressions on their faces seemed to be magnified by their chubby faces. They were like a living advertisement, making everyone curious about what kind of delicacy could make them eat so happily. Although they felt that the price of 300 copper coins per serving was a little expensive, they still couldn't help but order a serving. For a moment, many new customers who had just entered the restaurant for the first time were attracted. 5 minutes later, the system notified him that the takeout box was ready. Meg, who was cooking the Yangju fried rice, looked back and saw a bigger iron box beside the Ruggiamo bag. A stack of brown wooden boxes were neatly stacked inside. Meg turned off the stove and walked over to pick up one of the boxes. The box was as thick as a cardboard shell, but very hard. It was also inlaid with a layer of transparent plastic, which looked very fresh and clean. He didn't need to worry about the soup leaking out. The words Amy's were printed in golden letters on the lid of the box, and below it was an outline of Amy's lovely back. In the lower right corner of the box was a row of small words with the restaurant's address. It looked very delicate and simple. If it weren't for the fact that the box was a bit too thin, it could have been used as a regular bowl. Not bad. It suits the atmosphere of the restaurant very well. Meg nodded with satisfaction. The workmanship and quality of the food produced by the system were excellent. 10 copper coins did seem a bit excessive. Of course, he didn't feel guilty at all. The system had agreed so quickly, so obviously there was still money to be made. Besides, there was no word Yangju fried rice on the box, so if he needed anything to take out in the future, he could just put it in the box. Mag put the fried rice in the pot into a box. The colorful fried rice still looked as beautiful as it was in the box. 1 Ruggiamo and 1 Yeongju fried rice, Mag said as he placed a Ruggiamo and a Yeongju fried rice in front of Gyurj. Here's 1 Ruggiamo and 1 Yeongju fried rice. Okay, thank you. Gyurj's eyes lit up as he looked at the delicate wooden box in front of him. Normally, a restaurant would give customers something like a crudely made earthen jar, but this wooden box looked as if it had been carefully made by a craftsman. If he didn't know better, he would have thought it was a gift box. Such an exquisite box was only sold for 20 copper coins. The boss must have paid for it himself, right? Gyurj had thought it was a little expensive, but now he felt he had gotten a great deal. Besides, his wife might be in a better mood after seeing such delicately packaged food. He couldn't wait to bring it back for her to try. Yeongju fried rice and Ruggiamo should be eaten while they're hot. Besides, Largi Ruggiamo is not suitable for pregnant women. Meg reminded Gyurj, who was holding the Ruggiamo in one hand and preparing to pick up the Yeongju fried rice cautiously. Okay, Mag. I'll pay for this Yeongju fried rice and Ruggiamo first. They'll pay for the other 2 Ruggiamos later. Gyurj nodded. He took out the dragon coin and was about to hand it to Mag when Mag stopped him. Mr. Mac, it's all on me, Harrison said. 9 gold coins in total. Amy came over with Ugly Duckling in her arms and a gold coin in her little hand. Gyurj put the dragon coin in Amy's hand and put the gold coin away. He smiled at Amy and said, "You're a good helper. I have a little brother who's about your age at home. I'll bring him to play with you next time. I like little girls. Too bad you don't have one." Amy took the dragon coin and shook her head. The smile on Gyurj's face froze. He suddenly felt a little hurt, and he didn't know what to say. Ha ha ha. His friends burst into laughter. Meg also couldn't help laughing. Amy did like to play with little girls, but her answer was a little too straightforward. Maybe I will this time. Goodbye, Mr. Mac, Mr. Mac, Mr. Mac. Gyurj calmed himself down and regained his confidence. He said to Harrison, "I'll go take the food to your sister-in-law. Next time, it'll be my treat." Harrison waved his hand and smiled. "Go ahead. But I think from tomorrow on, you'll have to line up every day to buy food for your sister-in-law." "I agree." The fatty in cyan nodded. "How nice would it be if I could eat all kinds of delicious food at home without going out?" The fatty in red sighed as he watched Gyurj walk out with the fried rice carefully in his hands. "You can't afford to hire a chef like Mr. Mac," the fatty in green mocked. The fatty in red shook his head. "No, I mean, if you could find someone to bring the food to our house, I'd be happy to pay extra." Chapter 78. The bag of Ruggiamo is 5 copper coins, so the takeout box is 10 copper coins, Mag said calmly. The system's dissatisfaction? That's not part of the deal. 20 copper coins. The system was silent for a while, and then it argued, a plate of Yeongju fried rice earns a net profit of 300 copper coins. Even after deducting the cost of the takeout box of 20 copper coins, there's still a net profit of 280 copper coins. The system designs the box with the ability of a top designer, and then designs the logo with the ability of a top painter. All the materials are pollution-free, self-degradable, and reusable. 5 copper coins. Mag threw out his new offer casually, and then calmly said, "System, do you believe that he won't be dissatisfied if I ask him to take the plate and leave? And he'll wash the plate and bring it back to me tomorrow? Remember, this is a buyer's market. I think 300 copper coins is a little too little. 10 copper coins. Deal." The system's crisp voice sounded, with a little frustration and helplessness. "The takeout box is being made. The first batch will be available in 5 minutes. "Very good." Mag was very satisfied with the efficiency of the system. He turned to Gyurj with a smile, and said, "Okay, but you'll have to pay an extra 20 copper coins for takeout." 20 copper coins? Okay. Please pack one for me. I don't need my own. Gyurj thought for a while, and then nodded. Normally, other restaurants wouldn't charge extra for takeout, but since a plate of Yeongju fried rice already cost 600 copper coins, it wasn't hard to accept an extra 20 copper coins for takeout. As long as the Yeongju fried rice was as good as the Ruggiamo and could make his wife eat more, It wouldn't be a problem to double the price. Please wait a moment. Tang Sanzang nodded and went into the kitchen, ignoring the roaring of the system in his head. He was better at making money than he had imagined. He was just lazy in his previous life. Gyurge and the others continued to eat the second rujiamo, enjoying the delicious taste and the fat movement. The fleshy meat also attracted the attention of the customers who had just entered the restaurant. However, the joyful and enjoyable expressions on everyone's faces seemed to be magnified by their chubby faces, making them wonder what kind of delicacy could make them eat so happily. Although they felt that the price of 300 copper coins per serving was a little expensive, they couldn't help but order one. For a moment, many new customers who entered the restaurant for the first time were attracted by the delicacy. 5 minutes later, the system told them that the food boxes were ready. Mag, who was making Yeongju fried rice, looked back and saw a slightly bigger iron box next to the iron box with the bag of rujiamo, in which a stack of brown wooden boxes was neatly arranged. Mag turned off the fire and walked over to pick up one of the boxes. The box was as thick as cardboard, but it was quite hard, and the inside was inlaid with a layer of transparent plastic. It looked very fresh and clean, and he didn't have to worry about the soup leaking out. The words Mammy Restaurant were printed on the lid of the box in golden letters, and Amy's lovely back was sketched at the bottom. There was a row of small words in the lower right corner with the restaurant's address written on it. It looked very delicate and simple. If the box hadn't been so thin, it could have been used as a rice bowl. Mag nodded with satisfaction. Not bad. It suits the restaurant very well. The craftsmanship and quality of the system's products were excellent. 10 copper coins was indeed a little too much. Of course, he didn't feel guilty at all. The system had agreed so readily, so obviously, there was money to be made. Besides, the words Yeongju fried rice weren't printed on the box, so he could put anything he needed to take out in this box in the future. Mag put the fried rice in the pan into the box. The colorful fried rice didn't look any less beautiful in the box. A rujiamo and a Yeongju fried rice. Please hold them facing up. Mag placed a rujiamo and a plate of Yeongju fried rice in front of Jurguj. Jurguj shook his head. That's right. Okay. Thank you. Gyurge's eyes lit up as he looked at the delicate wooden box in front of him. Normally, a big bag in a restaurant would be a roughly made earthen jar or something, but this wooden box seemed to have been specially made by a craftsman. If he didn't know better, he would think it was a gift box. For such a beautiful box to be sold for only 20 copper coins, the owner must have paid for it himself, right? Gyurge had thought it was a little expensive, but now he felt he had gotten a great bargain. Besides, his wife might be in a better mood when she saw such delicately packaged food. He couldn't wait to take it home for her to try. Yeongju fried rice and rujiamo are better when they're hot. Besides, rujiamo is not suitable for pregnant women. Mag reminded Gyurge, who was holding the rujiamo in one hand and was about to pick up the Yeongju fried rice cautiously. Okay, Mag. I'll pay for this plate of Yeongju fried rice and rujiamo first. They'll pay for the other 2 rujiamos later. Gyurge nodded and handed the dragon coin to Mag. Boss Mag, put it all on me, Harrison said from the side. 9 gold coins. Amy came over with Ugly Duckling in her arms, a gold coin in her little hand. Gyurge put the dragon coin into Amy's hand, then put away the gold coin, and said with a smile, "You're such a good helper. I have a little brother who's about the same age as you at home. I'll bring him over to play with you next time." Amy took the dragon coin and shook her head. "I like little girls. It's a pity you don't have any." Gyurge's smile froze on his face. He suddenly felt a little hurt, and didn't know what to say. Ha ha ha. His buddies at the side burst into laughter. Mag couldn't help but chuckle. It was true that Amy liked to play with little girls and big sisters, but her answer was a little too straightforward. Maybe she will this time. Bye, Mag, little boss. Gyurge collected himself and regained his confidence. I'm going to bring food to your sister-in-law. It's my treat next time, he said to Harrison and the others. Go ahead. But I think from tomorrow on, you'll have to line up to buy food for your sister-in-law every day, Harrison said with a smile, waving his hand. The fatty in cyan nodded. I agree. How nice it would be if we could eat all kinds of delicious food at home without going out, the fatty in red sighed as he watched Gyurge carefully walk out with the fried rice. Your family can't afford a chef like Mag, the fatty in green teased. The fatty in red shook his head. No. I mean, if boss can find someone to bring food to our house, I'll be happy to pay a little more. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.